Big Ghosts Don't Cry by Danielle Garrett. Narrated by Amanda Ronconi. Introduction. Fresh off my voodoo-tastic vacation to New Orleans, I find myself presented with the first test of my newly discovered magic. There's been a murder in the neighboring town of Pine Shoals, and the victim has decided she's not cut out for the spectral life and needs a gentle push into the other world. As it turns out, conjuring some magic and telling a ghost to go towards the light isn't quite good enough. And now the hysterical ghost is stuck in some kind of limbo land. It's up to me to solve her murder before the poor ghost goes insane, or becomes demon food, whichever happens first. Reapers creepers. Chapter 1. When you're a ghost whisperer, friends don't expect you to bring wine or a decorative candle to their housewarming party. Instead, they expect you to come prepared with a stockpile of sage, a 5-pound bag of salt, and an iron poker. They will happily feed you appetizers in exchange for a thorough paranormal inspection and the subsequent exorcism of any wandering spirits. Hey, it beats being asked to lug boxes around on moving day. So, when my boyfriend, Lucas, invited me to come see his swanky new condo in downtown Seattle, I packed accordingly. He'd been moved in for a little over a week, but I hadn't yet been able to make a getaway to see it in person. Seattle was a 3-hour drive from Beechwood Harbor and required a little bit of planning, considering I owned and operated a flower shop. I came bearing gifts, I announced, handing him the bag of salt when he opened the front door. Laughing, he took it from me. I thought you were kidding about this. I like to come prepared, I teased. Aren't you curious to see if you have any invisible roommates? He mulled it over as he opened the door and ushered me into the condo. The unit was in a swanky, high-end building with spectacular views of the city and waterfront. The corporate rental was only meant to be Lucas's temporary digs until he could find his own permanent residence in the city. In the meantime, it was good to enjoy the high life. This view is ridiculous, I exclaimed, stopping in front of the wall of ceiling-to-floor windows. In keeping with the condo's minimalistic theme, there weren't any window treatments. Nothing but sparkling skyline, glittering under the hazy moon. I'm not missing the 2-star motels the studio used to put me up in, that's for sure, Lucas replied, crossing the room to stand beside me. He smiled at me, and then looked out the window. I've been to Seattle several times, but it looks different somehow. Like home? I ventured. He looped an arm around my waist, drawing me closer. It's starting to feel that way, he said, giving me a meaningful look. Oh, speaking of, I come bearing gifts, I said, reaching into the canvas bag slung across my chest. I pulled a gallon-sized glass jug out and presented it to Lucas. A growler of that beer you like at McNally's. With a wiggle of his brow, he took the large bottle. Now it's a party. And my shoulder is celebrating, I teased. Between the bag of salt and the growler, I got a mini workout in. Thank goodness this place has an elevator, or you'd have had to rescue me from the stairwell. Lucas laughed as he carried the growler to the kitchen. You want some of this now? I shook my head, wandering around the large living room as he stepped out of sight. I'll get something at dinner. I think we have just enough time for a tour before we go, he said, closing the fridge. He spread his arms out as he rounded the marble-topped island and rejoined me in the living room. First impressions? Besides the view. What do you think of the place? I think it's... Before I could answer, a trio of voices somewhere over my left shoulder all burst in with their opinions, and I cringed. I think it's wonderful, Gwen gushed, floating a couple feet off the floor. Scarlett, did you see 2 sinks in the bathroom? You could move right in. It's all fun and games until the elevator goes out and you're stuck walking up 14 flights of stairs. Flapjack, my deceased Himalayan cat, added. Not to mention the musty smell in the closet. I think someone must have kept a dead body in there. Or maybe it's still there. You know, behind the drywall. Ew, Flapjack, Gwen snapped. Don't be morbid. Quite distasteful, Flapjack. Hayward Kensington III chimed in. His Oxford accent emphasized his distaste of the grumpy cat's commentary. Across the living room, Lucas's smile faltered. Is it that bad? I mean, it's a little cold, and the art isn't really my taste, but I laughed and took a step toward him. No, it's not the art. I like it. Then why the hesitation? He paused, one brow lifted. They're here, aren't they? My nose wrinkled. Maybe? Scar? He threw his head back, pleading with the ceiling. I thought we'd marked this as a one-on-one kind of thing, he said, then glanced past me and quickly added, no offense to any of you, of course. Flapjack scoffed. The only thing I find offensive is the amount of hair products he keeps in that musty bathroom. Gwen giggled. He clearly knows what he's doing with all of it, though I'd be willing to bet he looks just as good first thing in the morning. Tousled hair, pajama bottoms, no shirt. Beside her, Hayward cleared his throat, loudly. I sighed. They wanted to come see the city, and so I kinda offered to let them tag along, I said, ignoring the paranormal peanut gallery. They're not staying, I promise. Swiveling around, I shot Flapjack a meaningful glance. In fact, I think they were just leaving now that they've seen the place. Mm-hmm. Lucas didn't look convinced. I made an overly dramatic shooing gesture at the ghostly trio. Go on, see the sights, breathe in the smells. Pike's Market, here I come, Flapjack said with glee. That's where they throw the fish, he informed Hayward and Gwen. I cringed. The fish market was likely already closed, but I wasn't going to be the one to tell him. We should be taking our leave as well, Hayward said, holding his arm out for Gwen. We're having dinner aboard a cruise ship this evening. And by having dinner, he means watching other people eat while eavesdropping on their conversations. Gwen explained in a conspiratorial whisper as if Lucas might overhear her, which, strictly speaking, wasn't possible. Enjoy! See you in the morning. Not a minute before 10:30. I called after the three ghosts as they floated back out the front door. I'm putting up a salt ring just in case. You'd think a simple do not disturb sign would do the trick, Lucas said, coming to join me. Oh, to live in such a world, I said, laughing. He kissed me, and I tasted the craft beer on his lips. Someone had a sample, I teased when we broke apart. Did I get the right one? It's perfect, thank you. He smiled. Why does it feel like longer than 3 weeks since the last time I saw you? I was thinking the same during the drive, I confessed. New Orleans seems like it was a year ago, not a month. Lucas glanced down at the floor between us for a moment before meeting my eyes again. How are you doing with everything? He wasn't talking about business at my flower shop or life with my pack of ghosts. There was a deeper specificity to his question, one I wasn't interested in discussing, at least not tonight. I smiled. Things are good. I should have given you a heads up about the gang tagging along. I guess I was kind of hoping they'd take a hint and slip out mid-tour. Lucas furrowed his brows as a slow smile tugged at his lips. Really, Scar? I might not be able to hear them, but even I know there's no way they'd leave voluntarily. I cringed. He was right, of course. The trio wasn't exactly known for being respectful of our privacy. Now, with Lucas permanently stationed in Seattle, we'd need to establish some ground rules. Whether the ghosts agreed to them or not was a separate battle. It's been hard for me to say no to them since we got back from New Orleans, I told him. I guess I still feel a little guilty over the way I treated them before leaving for the trip, especially when we both would have been in real trouble had they not come to the rescue. Lucas gave an understanding smile and brushed a loose strand of my copper-colored hair out of my face. Fair enough. I'd probably still be sitting in a jail cell if it hadn't been for them, and you. And now look at you, I said, gesturing at the large living space. Living like a king. He laughed and captured one of my hands. You should see my new office. Maybe next visit you can meet me there. Deal. Now let's talk about these dinner reservations you made. How fancy do I need to get? We were celebrating his new job, his new condo, and his permanent move to Seattle. He'd made reservations as soon as he'd moved in and received his hire-on bonus with the international security firm. I wasn't sure of the dollar amount, but judging on the rental they'd put him up in, the company wasn't hurting for cash and was generous to its employees. 45 minutes later, I was sufficiently dressed up enough to fit the dress code standards of the high-end restaurant Lucas had selected. He wore a three-piece suit and looked darn good doing it. And as we walked to our table, I noticed more than a few pairs of female eyes turned toward him. I smiled to myself, thinking of Gwen's reaction if she'd stuck around long enough to see us leave for dinner. We were seated, and within a few minutes, we'd ordered a bottle of wine and a round of appetizers. The prices on the menu made my eyes bug out, but I held my tongue. It was Lucas's night, and this was how he wanted to celebrate. I'd grown up with money. Extravagant dinners were nothing new to me. I had a handle on which fork to use for which course, and knew the difference between a palate-cleansing sorbet and a true dessert by the time I was 4. But I'd left that life behind, much to my parents' chagrin, and rarely dipped a toe in the 24-karat gold swimming pool of the rich and famous. As we waited for our entrees, we nibbled on fondue and considered the interior of the restaurant. It was a beautiful building, and everything from the linens to the art to the furnishings had been carefully selected to create an elegant, almost old-world atmosphere. "So you've told me the office is cool. What about the people, your team?" I asked, pouring myself a little more wine. "It's different," he said, giving a nod when I hovered the bottle over the rim of his glass. "I'm not used to working in an office or keeping regular hours. It's a lot of meetings and collaboration, which is nice, but I'm adjusting to not being the lead." He chuckled. That sounded more arrogant than I intended. I shook my head and set the wine aside after topping off Lucas's glass. "I don't think it's arrogance. You're used to boots on the ground, giving the orders and keeping everyone on track. Sitting in a boardroom making plans for things happening half a world away is a huge shift." He raised his glass. "It is." "You'll adjust," I told him, smiling over the rim of my own glass. "I have no doubt." "Well, I get my first taste of fieldwork here in a few weeks." My eyebrows lifted. "I've received my first international assignment," he said. "To Spain. I'll be gone for 3 weeks." My heart sank. I'd known travel was part of the job requirements, but hadn't expected it to come so soon or to last for so long. We'd spent our entire relationship living long distance. He'd spent more time in Beechwood Harbor with me, but only for a few weeks here and there in between filming assignments for the reality TV show he'd worked on. I couldn't say why this new development was different than the past, but it tugged on some new thread of emotion, and I had to work to force a smile. "That sounds exciting. Spain is lovely." He went into some of the details, and I did my best to listen and keep my smile in place. But something a few tables down drew my attention away. A ghost was hovering over a diner, a malicious gleam in her haunted eyes. The ghost, a female, who looked to have passed away while still in her teen years, dipped her silvery, semi-transparent hands into the middle-aged woman who was enjoying a chocolate tart. The woman sat up a little, her shoulders lifted. The teenage ghost cackled and touched the woman again. My eyes narrowed. "Scarlett?" Lucas said, concern in his voice. "Is something wrong?" I'm sorry," I said, tearing my attention away from the ghost. "I thought I saw someone I went to school with, but I was wrong." I reached for my wine glass. "You were saying?" Just that I'm looking forward to..." I signaled for a passing server. "Scarlett, what's going on?" Lucas asked, leaning forward. "I'm sorry. It's just there's something of a situation over there at that table." The server stopped at the table and I asked for a salt shaker. They weren't readily available on the table, and my small clutch wasn't large enough for the small iron omelet pan I usually carted around in case of ghost misbehavior. The servant masked a strange look and hurried off to find me one. "What are you going to do with a salt shaker?" Lucas asked. "Scare off that ghost over there before it goes any further. I don't know if they know how to possess someone, but if they don't already, they're about 3 seconds away from figuring it out." The server was nowhere to be seen, and the ghost was dipping her hands back into the woman. I jolted to my feet. Lucas swore quietly. I marched across the dining room, eyes boring into the teenager's silver-hued profile. I cleared my throat, and the 2 diners, as well as the ghost, turned to look at me. The teenage ghost reared back as she met my eyes and realized I was glaring at her instead of blankly looking past her. "Can we help you?" the man asked, giving me a suspicious frown. I narrowed my eyes at the ghost, before rearranging my face into a polite smile for the man and his wife. "I'm terribly sorry to interrupt. I thought you looked familiar, but it appears I was mistaken. Enjoy your meal." "Oh, well, thank you," the man said. I turned and stalked back to my table with Lucas. "You can see me?" the ghost hissed, right on my heels. "How? Who are you? What's your name?" I ignored the ghost's questions, happy to have distracted her from the unsuspecting couple in time. The server reappeared at the table and held out a silver salt shaker. I quickly took it and gripped it in one hand, concealing it from the ghost behind me. "Is there anything else, ma'am?" the server asked, a wariness in her eyes. "Your entree should be here shortly." "Thank you. This should do it," I told her, retaking my seat calmly. The teen swooped closer. "Hey, I'm talking to you. What are you? How can you see me?" Under the table, I shook salt into my open palm, collecting a small pile as quickly as possible. When I didn't answer, the ghost shifted her attention to Lucas. He's yummy." She reached for his hand resting on the table. "I wonder what it would feel like to touch him." "Leave us alone," I hissed, hurling the salt in the ghost's face. She shrieked, and then growled, before dispersing into a cloud of silver that faded away like an early morning cloud. Lucas blinked. "Scarlet?" "Sorry," I said, setting the salt shaker aside. "Just doing a little pest control." He glanced around. "It's all clear. Problem solved," I said, brushing my hands together to get rid of the excess salt. "Now, have I ever told you about the cafe I waitressed at in Barcelona?" Chapter 2. "Lizzie, can you get me the bucket of pink carnations from the cooler?" "Sure," my assistant chirped from the front of the flower shop. Moments later, the cheerful blonde appeared at my side and placed a 5-gallon bucket of cherry blossom pink flowers at my feet. "This looks great so far," she said, studying the large funeral wreath I was crafting. "Thanks," I said, tucking another piece of boxwood into the squishy block of floral foam that formed the ring. With a quick sideways glance, I plucked a full carnation from the bucket, placed it in the arrangement, and then glanced up to identify the other sparse spots. "I should have finished it yesterday." "It's all right," Lizzie said. "You're almost done, and the service is still a few hours away. Plenty of time." Lizzie's boundless optimism was one of the qualities I'd grown to love over the past several months, since hiring her on as a part-time assistant at my flower shop, Lily Pond. When she'd started, she hadn't known the difference between a peony and a petunia, but she'd proved to be a quick study and was capable of most basic design orders on her own. Her early klutzy streak was fading, replaced with an ever-growing confidence in her skills since I'd hired her on full-time. During my time visiting Lucas in New Orleans, I'd had my reservations about leaving the shop in her hands, but found things in perfect order and even received a handful of phone calls from our regular customers to let me know they appreciated her service in my absence. I paused to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear and glanced at the whiteboard calendar on the wall behind Lizzie. She sidestepped out of my way and gestured at the colorful writing. "These are the only ones left for today. I can finish up while you run this over to the funeral home. We've been pretty dead up front for most of the day. I think a lot of people are down at the beach for the cleanup." "Oh, you're probably right. I hadn't even thought about that." I blew out a puff of air. Sheesh, this day is really getting away from me. The kids were back in school, and tourist season, along with wedding season, was officially done for another year. To celebrate another successful busy season, the town's Chamber of Commerce had pulled together a potluck-style barbecue on the beach, weather permitting, and had invited all local vendors and their families to come celebrate. Taking advantage of the gathering, the mayor decided to host an all-day town beautification event preceding it. Tourist season was great for the town's businesses, but wreaked havoc on the beach and streets as people poured into town. Beechwood Harbor was a small town, but a popular stop for fellow Washingtonians, as well as people from all across the country. some of whom were not as eco-minded as others. To counteract the damage, City Council arranged discount booklets featuring coupons to local companies to be handed out to those participating in the cleanup projects all around town and down on the beach itself. I donated several hanging baskets to one of the local clubs, and had struck a deal with a local nursery to deliver a truckload of leftover annuals directly to the town's senior center. The mayor gifted me a coupon book in exchange for my help, assuaging my guilt over not being able to comb the beach for trash on the final day of the town beautification. "Are you going to the barbecue tonight?" Lizzie asked. I nodded and placed a few more carnations. "I was planning on swinging by. You?" She hesitated, and I glanced up. Lizzie's cheeks had gone pink, and she was chewing her lower lip. "I'm not sure." "Oh, come on, it'll be fun. You play a little beach volleyball, dance, mingle, have some spiked punch." Flapjack chuckled from his place on my work table. "As I recall, Scar, the last time you went to a barbecue, you didn't do any of that. You stuffed yourself with an impressive amount of potato salad, fell asleep on a picnic blanket, and woke up with a nasty sunburn." I scowled at him. "Mrs. Garland makes a prize-worthy potato salad, and you're just jealous you can't have any." Realizing I'd said the quiet part out loud, I winced and peeked over at Lizzie. "I mean, you'd be jealous if you didn't get any. So you might want to get there early." "Nice save," Flapjack purred, his wheezy version of a laugh catching in his throat. "Well, actually, someone asked me to go to the barbecue, but I'm not sure if it's a date or if it's just an as friends kind of thing." Lizzie paused, wringing her hands together. "So I wasn't sure I'd go at all. The whole thing is making me nervous." I smiled, resisting the urge to pounce on her. "Who asked you?" Lizzie had been woefully single since I'd met her, and while we'd never talked too much about her past, I'd gathered a fair dose of heartbreak resided somewhere in the not-too-distant rear view. Hayward, who'd been hanging out in the shop most of the day, shifted uncomfortably and rose from his seat. "Come along, Flapjack. I believe I know girl talk when I hear it. Perhaps we gentlemen should scurry along." "Scurry along?" Flapjack snorted. "That's rich, coming from the guy who reads Cosmo over Lizzie's shoulder." Hayward bristled, his bristle-brush mustache twitching. "That's preposterous." Flapjack smiled like the Cheshire. "In any case," Hayward bumped him with a quick elbow, "we should go. Gwen will be at the beach by now, waiting for us to join her." "Fine." Flapjack glared up at Hayward but got to his feet, his feather duster tail swirling like a boat propeller. "I was going anyway," he said casually. "They'll start grilling the fish soon." With that, he winked out of sight, off to wander the beach and breathe in the scent of the fresh-caught fish. A ghost's life didn't have many pleasures. Flapjack's revolved around sarcasm and the smell of fish. Hayward righted his top hat and vanished. "Do you know Bryant Lewis?" Lizzie asked, drawing my attention back to her date or not a date quandary. "He's a checker over at Hank's Hardware." "Oh, a checker. That's a stable future," Flapjack's disembodied voice called. I bit down on the insides of my cheeks to keep from barking his name. I'd make the little furball pay later. He was lucky Lizzie couldn't hear him. "I think I've talked to him before," I said. "Sandy brown hair. Looks like he played football in high school." Lizzie blushed. Clearly, she'd admired his squared shoulders a time or two. I smiled. "You should go. Even if it's not a date, you'll have a good time and make all the other single ladies jealous." I winked and brushed my hands off on my apron. A month had passed since my last manicure, though I'd never gotten around to fully taking off the remaining polish. I silently noted it was time for a return to the town's day spa and wondered if there was a coupon in the booklet from the mayor. Now that I'd be seeing Lucas a lot more often, I needed to start scheduling regular manicures. Not for him, per se. Lucas might wear a suit for his new job and live in a fancy high-rise, but at heart, he was a jeans and t-shirt kind of guy. He drove a truck, hated frou-frou coffee, and probably hadn't even noticed the manicure I'd had done before visiting him in the Big Easy. Despite his no-frills preference, there were bound to be company parties, corporate functions, and dinner parties in our future as he settled into his new job. Green nails and tattered cuticles simply wouldn't do. I should probably get a few more dresses and purses, too. Gwen would be delighted to help. She inhaled fashion magazines like oxygen and spent the majority of her time haunting, literally, the town beauty parlor. If I told her I needed a wardrobe update, she'd no doubt have 10 suggestions at the tips of her fingers. "All right," I said, carefully lifting the large and heavy arrangement from my workstation. "I'm going to take everything over to the funeral home. If it's still dead once you finish those last few orders, go ahead and lock up early and head to the barbecue. I'll see you and Bryant down there." Lizzie flushed again and scurried to prop open the back door for me. Within 10 minutes, I had the arrangements loaded into the Lily Pond delivery van and was backing out of the shop's designated parking space. Beechwood Harbor was a small town, the kind of place where the shops were named after their owner or their owner's parents who'd originally opened the place. There was one market, one coffee house, a handful of restaurants, and a few motels and bed and breakfasts. I drove down Main Street through town and within minutes pulled into the lot beside the funeral home. As the town's sole flower shop, Lily Pond did a lot of business with the funeral home, and no one was surprised to see me when I backed through the glass side door, arms wrapped around a large hurricane vase. The flowers obscured my face, but a passing employee greeted me by name all the same. "Need some help?" Garth asked, after we exchanged pleasantries. "Maybe with the wreath. I'll be right back up for it." "Sure thing, Scarlett." "Thanks." I knew the place like the back of my hand. Not hard to do, considering its size, and quickly made my way to the small viewing room, where memorial services were often held. There were 2 churches in town, but the smaller or non-religious services tended to be held right at the funeral home. It was one of the town's historic homes that now housed small businesses. In the funeral home's case, almost everything in the interior remained original to the home, with only some minor updating to modern codes. Services were held in the former living room, a large space with polished wood floors, a large fireplace, and built-in shelving along one wall. It was always set up and ready for a service, with rows of folding wooden chairs, a thick carpet down the aisle, a pulpit at the front that blocked part of the fireplace from view, and a few tables for flowers. The service tonight was a memorial service and wouldn't have a casket, so I designed a large wreath of flowers that would hang from an easel beside a blown-up portrait of the deceased. The large hurricane vase in my arms went on the table beside the urn, just as I'd discussed with the family when they'd come for their consultation. The funeral home had several package options available for those who didn't want one more decision to make. But oftentimes, families wanted to meet with me and discuss the arrangements ahead of time. The woman being memorialized the following day had been young at the time of her death, only 46. She'd left behind both her parents, along with a brother, and perhaps most tragically, a teenage daughter. The arrangement shifted slightly, and I paused to maneuver some of the blooms back into their rightful places. "This is all for me?" I turned, startled by the voice, and found a ghost standing in the doorway of the viewing room, her mouth agape, silvery eyes wide. Crap. Had she seen me? Did she know I'd heard her? Without a word, I did a dramatic stretch, pressing my palms into my sides and arching backward, trying to convince the ghost I'd had some kind of muscle spasm. What can I say? Desperate times? Pathetic measures. The ghost watched me, but I avoided meeting her gaze head-on and went back to arranging the flowers. If she didn't know I'd heard her, then she wouldn't know I could see her, and she'd leave me alone. And, above all, I could make it to the barbecue before all of Mrs. Garland's potato salad was gone. Chapter 3. The spirit came further into the viewing room, her limbs awkward. Perfect. Not only is there a ghost wandering around, but it's a helpless baby ghost. Oh, why me? It usually takes new ghosts a while to get the hang of their new mode of transportation. While they no longer require the use of their legs to get from point A to point B, most try to keep using their legs anyway. Muscle memory is a hard thing to break, even after death. I glanced at the large portrait at the front of the room and then back at the ghost. It was Sabrina Hutchins, the woman being memorialized. Before I could decide whether or not to blow my cover, and possibly my chance at a plate full of potato salad, the air beside Sabrina shimmered, and a second spirit appeared. This one wearing feather earrings and a wide smile as she waved at me. "Scarlet! There you are!" I cringed and looked away. "Oh, excuse me, am I interrupting something?" Gwen said, presumably to Sabrina. "I don't think we've met before. I'm Gwen." "Sabrina," the second ghost said. I fussed with a pair of roses, wishing ghost telepathy came along with all my other wackadoodle gifts. "Yoo-hoo, Scarlet!" Gwen called. "You know she can't see us, right? I'm new to this, but it's pretty obvious we're ghosts and the living can't see or hear us." Gwen laughed. "Scarlet's not the most... crap." I shoved a rose back into place and spun on my heels to face both spirits, shooting daggers at Gwen. Sabrina blinked. "You can see me?" Crossing my arms, I nodded. "Yes, and I'm sorry, but I'm really busy and I don't have a lot of time for small talk." Sabrina didn't look offended. She propelled herself to the altar, her gaze fixed on the large portrait of herself. "Oh, honey, is this your service?" Gwen asked her, floating a few paces behind. "You're a new ghost?" Sabrina nodded. Gwen shot me a look. "Scar, we have to help her." "Help me how?" Sabrina asked. "I'm already dead. Seems a little late to do much of anything. I can't hop back in my body and force myself to wake up from this nightmare." She peeked at Gwen. "Can I?" Gwen gave a solemn shake of her head. "No, I'm afraid what's done is done. Do you know how you died?" "Not really." Sabrina paused, staring at the urn. "Is that, me?" Gwen looked at me, and I nodded. With that confirmation, the 70s era spirit sidled up to Sabrina and placed a steadying hand at her back. "It is," she said softly. "It looks like your family had your remains cremated." A sob caught in Sabrina's throat, and Gwen moved closer, pulling the woman into an embrace. "It's okay. We'll help you adjust to your new life. It's cliché, but really it does help to think of this as a new beginning rather than an ending." I poked my head out into the hallway, making sure no one was within earshot. The funeral home didn't boast a large staff, but with a service hours away from beginning, the funeral home director, Carla Leeson, and her 2 staff members were bound to be nearby finishing the preparations. Communicating with ghosts was a gift, but it came with a whole host of complications. Mostly that, by and large, people would think I was certifiable if I told them the truth. I had a handful of tricks to get away with public ghost chats, the most popular of which was a small Bluetooth earpiece I could use to make it appear as though I were talking to someone on the phone rather than to thin air. The earpiece was back at the flower shop, and therefore not an option for the current conversation. Gwen knew I didn't like chatting with strange ghosts outside my set-aside office hours. But she had a heart of gold and wasn't likely to enforce the rules when presented with a newcomer who needed assistance. "Gwen," I said, jerking my head to beckon her closer. "A word?" Reluctantly, Gwen disentangled herself from Sabrina and floated across the viewing room to join me. "Scarlet, I can't believe you were just pretending you couldn't see or hear her." Guilt nipped at me, but I did my best to ignore it. "Her service is starting in 2 hours. I don't really think it's a good idea for her to be here." "Why not?" "She's not going to feel better if she sits and listens to her family and friends eulogize her, and then watch them all go back to their normal lives while she has to stay behind. That can't possibly be helpful." "You never know, it might be." Gwen paused and glanced at Sabrina's back. "I guess I could take her down to the barbecue. I could introduce her around, show her that there's plenty of fun to be had in the afterlife." I chewed my lower lip. I don't know, that might be too much. The full force of Beechwood Harbor's Ghost Brigade was overwhelming to me, and I saw a good majority of them on a daily basis. "Well, what do you suggest?" Gwen asked, tossing her hands up. "No funeral and no barbecue, so what? I could take her to Siren Song and let her decompress." "The coffee shop? How would that help?" "I don't know," she shrugged. "The espresso machine is like white noise." Of my 3 permanent ghostly companions, Gwen was not the one I'd choose for new ghost orientation. She was a vivacious spirit, with a fuller afterlife than most of the living enjoyed while still breathing. She also had a tendency to talk 100 miles an hour and forget that not everyone wants to be the life of the party. Why couldn't Flapjack have been the one to come find me? He wouldn't have given Sabrina more than a second glance. Which reminded me. "What are you even doing here?" I asked Gwen. "I thought you were down at the beach already. Flapjack and Hayward left a while ago to meet you." "Oh!" Gwen's eyes brightened. "Well, I was at the beach, and you're never going to believe what I just heard." I groaned. "You came all this way to gossip?" Gwen blinked. "Of course." Sabrina turned. "What am I supposed to do now? Why am I even here?" Torn between a ghost's existential crisis and Gwen's gossip fest. Lucky me. "Usually it means you have some kind of unfinished business. Any idea what that might be?" Gwen asked, her tone of voice overly cheery, as if asking the woman if she'd seen the most recent Nicholas Sparks movie. I don't know," Sabrina replied. "I don't even know what happened to me. How did I die?" Gwen looked at me expectantly. I don't know," I said. "I'm just here to deliver the flowers." I gestured at the nearest bouquet. "Who ordered them?" Sabrina asked, gliding a little more gracefully toward the wreath at the front of the room. "My parents?" "Yes," I replied softly. "They picked out everything personally. They told me lilacs were your favorites. We used lavender here." "It's pretty. Thank you." Gwen gave me a pained look. "Maybe you could do the thing?" My eyes widened, shocked she'd even bring it up. "What thing?" Sabrina asked. "Please, if there's anything you can do to help me." "I have a support group for ghosts," I told her, giving Gwen a warning glance. "Local ghosts come to my flower shop once a week to talk about their experiences and offer each other help and support. There are ghosts in every stage of, afterlife. It might help." "I'll be there too," Gwen offered helpfully. "Do you want me to come and get you? Will you be here, you think?" She glanced around the viewing room with a wary eye. I don't know, I guess so." She shrugged and glanced around the room. "I haven't tried leaving yet." "Wait, you woke up here?" I asked. Sabrina nodded. That was a little odd. In my experience, ghosts usually started their new life at the place their previous one had ended. So unless Sabrina kicked it at the funeral home, she was a little delayed. Her earthly life had ended a week and a half ago, according to the information I'd gathered from her parents. They'd push things out to make the arrangements for the service and allow time for her extended family to make travel plans, as most of them lived out of state. I glanced at my watch. The barbecue was starting in 15 minutes. Everyone would be trekking down to the sand, carrying coolers, beach chairs, and picnic blankets. The kids would have all their sandcastle-making tools, and there were bound to be at least a dozen dogs running around, barking at seagulls. I told Lizzie I would meet her down there. Then there was the potato salad. And yes, it really was that good. "I have to get going," I said, a new flurry of impatience welling up. "I have to go home and change and get my strawberry pie from the fridge. Listen, Sabrina, come to the support group. We'll talk more then, okay?" The woman nodded, but I couldn't decide whether she intended to follow through or not. Gwen glanced at me. There was no doubt she was itching to get back to the beach. When the whole town gathered, there was bound to be gossip buzzing like a hive of bees, and Gwen would be there to scoop up as much honey as she could. As much as she wanted to help Sabrina, she wouldn't be able to resist the call back to the beach. "Are you sure you want to stay here?" she asked gently. "The barbecue will be a lot more fun." "I'll be fine," Sabrina said, her jawline set. Gwen looked at me. I shrugged. "Okay, well, if you change your mind, you know where to find us." I left the viewing room with Gwen in tow. Carla came around the corner, clipboard in hand, and offered me a warm smile. Garth, her full-time employee, followed right behind, carrying the large wreath of flowers. "Thank you, Garth. I got the easel all prepped," I told him. He nodded and then continued into the viewing room. Carla smiled. "Beautiful work, as always." "Thank you." "Are you heading to the barbecue?" she asked. "After a quick pit stop back home. I replied with a nod. Maybe I'll see you later then, Carla replied. She gestured at the doors of the viewing room. It's a small affair tonight. I don't imagine the service will take long, and they've opted to have the reception off-site. Smiling, I raised a hand and moved to sidestep her. See you down there, then. As soon as I started the delivery van's engine, Gwen winked into the passenger seat and started babbling about Lizzie's maybe date with Bryant from the hardware store. According to Tanya, Bryant just got out of a 2-year long-distance relationship with his high school sweetheart. He's not exactly on the rebound, but he hasn't been single long. Although with those shoulders and that chin dimple... Gwen! I snapped. She jolted, her eyes going wide. What? Why did you tell that woman I could help her? And then to even suggest that I use my power on her? What were you thinking? Oh, well, I don't know, Scarlett. She seemed so sad. I thought maybe you could just give her a little nudge. I closed my eyes, silently counting to 5 when I stopped at the 4-way intersection. When I opened them again, I smashed the heel of my hand against the turn signal and pulled the van to the left. First of all, don't make it sound like it's not a big deal. It is, and we both know it. I don't have a handle on my powers. For all I know, I could try to help her cross over and end up slingshotting her to who knows where. I know you are only trying to help, but I'm not comfortable discussing my powers, especially not with strange ghosts. I'm sorry, Scarlett. Gwen's eyes dropped to the floor between us. I wasn't trying to cause problems. I know, I said gently, wishing I could reach out and pat her arm for reassurance. I hadn't meant to snap at her, but I needed to get that point across, and sometimes Gwen wasn't the best at picking up subtleties. I drew in a deep breath and smiled at her. It's all right. No harm done. And I think after some time to think, Sabrina will join our group. Can you try to swing by and invite her again once it's closer to Tuesday's meeting, I mean? That made her brighten. Gwen was frozen in time right at her peak, barely out of her teen years when she took an ill-fated header off a stage at an outdoor music festival. Her feathered hair was silver-hued, along with the rest of her, but I knew that if I'd met her in life, I'd have mistaken her for a young Farrah Fawcett from that iconic red bathing suit shot. She had an open face with expressive eyes and an easy smile. With Gwen, I never had to wonder what she was thinking. 1, because she was a total chatterbox and always said exactly what was on her mind, and 2, because the girl had 0 chance of ever developing a poker face. Gwen had no desire to leave her spectral life. She loved being a ghost and spent her days as the maven of Beechwood Harbor's spirit community. Since I'd moved to town, she'd latched onto me as a conduit to help her many friends, and was nearly single-handedly responsible for the weekly meetings I held to help local ghosts. In exchange, she made sure, well, she did her best, to keep ghosts from interrupting me or approaching me cold on the street. Or while at the grocery store, or visiting the local coffee house, or dining at a restaurant, or, and perhaps most importantly, whilst driving. Not to mention, Hayward had a massive crush on her, and I was fairly certain those feelings were reciprocated. They'd gone back and forth a little in recent weeks, but at my last inquiry they were inching ever nearer to making things official. Though I wasn't 100% sure what that entailed, considering they were both dead. I'd never asked, unsure I ever wanted to find out what went on behind the closed door of a spirit world boudoir. I pulled the van into its designated spot and cut the engine. Go on ahead, I told Gwen. I'm going to go upstairs and change. I'll meet you down at the beach. Try to scare off anyone by the potato salad. She laughed and then made a mock salute. You got it. Bye, Scar. With a swirl, she zoomed out the side of the van door. 15 minutes later, my toes were buried in the sand, and a plate of Mrs. Garland's potato salad balanced on my knees. I changed into a pair of denim shorts and a black tank top. I wore a floppy sun hat to keep my fair skin away from the sun's harsh rays, all the while hoping for a tiny bit of color on my stems. The beach was packed with locals. Most congregated around the 2 folding tables laden down with potluck dishes. A volleyball net was set up closer to the surf, and currently hosted a 3-on-3 of high school teens. The boys had stripped their t-shirts off, and the girls were trying, and failing miserably, not to ogle. Ah, young love. I snorted at Flapjack's sudden appearance in the beach chair beside me. I think you've got the wrong L word, my friend. After all, no one does desperate lust quite like a pack of teenagers. Flapjack smiled. I miss those days. Back when you kissed a Justin Timberlake poster every night before bed. I did not, I protested, even as my cheeks warmed. No doubt a tomato red that I couldn't blame on the afternoon sun. Scar. That thing had enough lip gloss kiss prints it could have doubled as a Revlon ad. Gee, how lucky I am to have a walking, talking time capsule, I muttered, sinking down in my chair. I shoveled in a bite of potato salad, the tangy bliss perking up my mood. Flapjack swished his tail, clearly pleased with himself. I'll always be here to remind you of your glory days. Wonderful. I shoved another bite of potato salad into my mouth and swallowed hard when a shadow appeared in the sand beside my own. This seat taken? I craned around and saw Chief Jeffrey Lincoln standing behind Flapjack's chair. No, please, sit. Flapjack shot me a dirty look and jumped down a moment before Chief sat on, or rather, threw him. He hiked his tail in the air and started down the beach. A few other ghosts dotted the party, invisible guests to the afternoon barbecue, some of whom had been in town since its founding. Across the way, chatting with Gwen and Hayward, were Posey and Earl, the town's original founders. Are you enjoying the barbecue? Chief Lincoln asked, stabbing his fork through a juicy piece of late-season watermelon. I am, thanks. And you? Definitely. It's one of my favorite annual celebrations, he replied, bobbing his head. It's nice when everyone gets together like this, and the beach cleanup was a big success. It does look great, and so much quieter now. He chuckled. I can't stay long, though. Oh? There's a service up at the funeral home, and I'm making it a point to be there for the family. You mean Sabrina Hutchins' service? That's right. He gave me a curious look. I just dropped off the flowers, I explained. Oh, right. Of course. Did you know her? I asked, scooping up my next bite. Not personally. I'm part of the investigation, working with the Pine Shoals PD. My spoon stilled midway to my mouth. Investigation? Chief nodded. Tragically, Sabrina was murdered. A hot knife of guilt sliced through me, and I put my fork down. My appetite gone. Chapter 4. The festive barbecue faded to the background as Chief Lincoln's words sunk in, echoing through my mind. Murdered? I repeated, suddenly feeling too cold. Chief Lincoln looked pained. Sorry. I assumed you knew. It was in the paper. Oh, I don't usually get around to reading it, I said. He rubbed a hand over the back of his neck. She was attacked in her home. At this point, we think it might be a copycat to the Seaside Strangler. Now that case, I'd heard about. 2 summers ago, before I'd even moved to Beechwood Harbor, a serial killer had moved up the coast, murdering 3 women and attempting a 4th before he was apprehended. The case made national news, and had caught my attention even while I'd been home with my family in Arizona. My mom tried to talk me out of moving here because of that case, I told Chief Lincoln. If he hadn't been caught in the weeks before my move, I'm pretty sure she would have followed me to the airport and staged a sit-in right there on the tarmac. Chief smiled. Sounds like my mother. During my first few weeks of police training, I was convinced she was going to pop out of the bushes and try to kidnap me. I laughed softly. I imagine you'd never have heard the end of that one if she'd tried. No kidding. He chuckled and popped a piece of watermelon into his mouth. My grandmother calls me weekly to tell me that she has her whole church praying over me. And right before we hang out, she always reminds me to put the safety on my gun. That's adorable, I replied, grinning at him. The darkness seeped away, and I put Sabrina in the back of my mind, with a brief mental note to make sure Gwen looked after her. Are you here alone tonight? Chief Lincoln asked, glancing around. Where's Lucas? Holly mentioned he was moving to town. Oh, well, not quite. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. He's in Seattle now. He got a job offer with an international security firm, and they put him up in a fancy corporate rental until he finds a more permanent place. Aha! Well, good for him. I'll bet you're glad he's closer. I smiled. Seattle's still a little far away for my taste, but I'm glad he's in one place, at least for the most part. Chief took a bite and chewed it thoughtfully, while watching the volleyball players for a moment before scanning the beach. He was clearly off duty, but even so, there was something about the set of his shoulders and keenness to his eyes that told me he wasn't fully relaxed. He paused, something catching his eye, and a smile spread across his lips. I followed his line of sight and found his fiancée, Cassie Frank, standing at the buffet line chatting with Holly Bolt and Adam St. James. It always entertained me to think about Beechwood's residents interacting with supernatural beings, completely clueless to the power and magic that pulsed just under the surface of the sleepy town. The Haven Council and Supernatural Protection Agency would never let supernaturals go public, but I sometimes like to think about the looks on people's faces if they were ever to realize a witch had been serving up their coffee, or the shaggy black dog that raided the town dumpsters, rummaging for food, was actually the town's heartthrob. Cassie and Chief Lincoln were both human and blissfully unaware of the magic world they lived in. "How are the wedding plans coming along?" I asked. Chief shrugged, still smiling. "I told Cassie to tell me when and where. The rest is up to her, unless she needs help." I laughed. Smart man. Chief Lincoln's phone chirped, and he reached for the case he wore clipped to his belt to silence it. "That's my cue," he said, pushing to his feet. "Enjoy the rest of the barbecue, Scarlett." "Thanks, Chief." I waved, and he set off, his stride as purposeful as possible in the deep sand. "Who was murdered?" Flapjack asked, winking back into the chair. I jolted. "Don't do that!" "What?" I narrowed my eyes at him. "We've discussed the blinking in and out thing." He sighed. "You really do take all the fun out of the afterlife, you know." I rolled my eyes and scooped up my final bite before the wind could kick up sand and ruin it. "Seriously, though, are you gearing up for another turn as the Ginger Nancy Drew?" Mouthful, I shot him a scowl. Flapjack switched his tail. "Fine. I'll make Gwen tell me. You know she can't keep a secret to save her life." "Well," he smirked, his whiskers twitching. "Guess it's a little late for that anyway." I leaned over, tugged at the beach tote I'd brought with me, and grabbed a small silver mister bottle. With 2 pumps, a lemon-infused mist sailed in Flapjack's direction. In the blink of an eye, the Himalayan arched his back, hackles raised. He hissed at me, and then vanished. I'd pay for it later, but I smiled to myself and enjoyed the newfound silence. I slipped the spray bottle back into the bag and went back to eating. For whatever reason, Flapjack abhorred the scent of lemon and would flee from it in any form. So, when he really got under my skin, I made it a point to use lemon-scented cleaners around the house. It guaranteed me a sarcasm-free afternoon and came with the side benefit of having a clean apartment. A few weeks ago, a woman had come into my shop pitching her essential oil company, and I'd purchased a few vials of lemon oil and the small mister bottle. The trick had just lost its sneak attack effect, but I also knew that next time I'd only have to brandish the bottle to get the mouthy cat off my case. Win-win. And now I could enjoy the barbecue and the sunset in peace. Tuesday's ghost meeting kicked off at 7 o'clock, once the shop was closed and Lizzie had punched out. I held the meetings in Lily Pond, mostly because I didn't like the idea of a horde of strange ghosts upstairs in my apartment. Besides Flapjack, Hayward, and Gwen, I preferred to keep my home as a sanctuary away from noisy ghosts. For the most part, the local ghosts respected my ground rules, largely because they knew that if they strayed outside the boundaries I'd put in place, I wouldn't help them, no matter how much they begged and pleaded. If they wanted my attention, they had to attend the weekly meeting and make their petition that way. Every now and again, a pushy ghost would come along and force me to put up precautionary measures inside my house, usually a ring of salt around the baseboards, windows, and doors. Of course, Hayward and Flapjack didn't appreciate being effectively locked out of their home, but they kept their grumbling to a minimum until a solution could be reached. Gwen didn't stay at my apartment with us. She had enough haunts that she never slowed down long enough to ghost sleep. Even when most of the town's residents were asleep, she'd be out exchanging information and gossip with other ghosts. I had no idea how they found enough to talk about. Beechwood Harbor wasn't a hip and happening hotspot. Beyond the occasional cheating spouse or new love affair, what could there be to talk about? "I just wish I could get the hang of it," Loretta, a ghost in her mid-60s, complained, after listening to one of the new members talk about learning to channel energy into making things move. All I want is to read a book again without having to hover over some patron's shoulder. It's so maddening waiting for them to catch up with me and turn the blasted page. Loretta had been a librarian in life and haunted the town library, fretting over the way her replacement stacked books and bemoaning the squeaky wheel on the metal cart. I had no proof, but I firmly believed that if she stepped away from the library, she'd find peace and be able to cross over into the other world. Her desire to control every minute detail of the goings-on in her library was the tether keeping her here on this plane. So far, she hadn't made it a day without darkening their door. As the regulars discussed the benefits of being able to move small objects, I moved around the shop, dusting and polishing. I preferred to use the meetings as a time to catch up on the tasks that easily slipped through the cracks, especially over the weekend, which tended to be busy. I usually took Sunday and Monday off, and kept the shop closed altogether on Monday, so both Lizzie and I could have a dedicated day off each week. Though, with Lucas in Seattle, I was wondering if I should renegotiate the schedule with Lizzie and see about taking Saturday and Sunday off in order to have a proper weekend off. It was still early enough that Lucas didn't have his schedule down pat, so I was biding my time. "Scarlett?" I turned at Gwen's voice, feather duster stilled. "Hmm?" She pointed at the door, just as Sabrina slipped through the glass, a strange look on her face, as though she still weren't entirely used to passing through solid materials. "Welcome, Sabrina," I greeted. "I'm so glad you came," Gwen said, surging forward to stand beside her. "Let me introduce you around." Sabrina shied away before Gwen could reach her. Her silver eyes flashed as she looked at me. "It might have been nice if you'd told me what happened." I looked to Gwen, but she looked caught off guard as well. I'm sorry, but you played dumb, like you didn't know I'd been killed. Murdered in cold blood." The other ghosts in the circle collectively moved back, some sliding through the front display window and vanishing into the night. We'd had unstable ghosts before. It usually ended in a mess. "Sabrina, I didn't know," I replied, lifting one hand in surrender while the other slipped under the front counter and wrapped around the handle of the small omelet-sized cast iron pan I kept there for such occasions. Flapjack could be scared off with a splash of lemon, but other ghosts tended to need a little more convincing. The business end of an iron pan did the trick. "I only found out about the murder after I delivered the flowers, I swear." I held the pan, but kept it out of sight. I didn't want to use it on her. Though I wasn't entirely sure what the sensation was like, I had to assume it wasn't pleasant. But then, the last ghost that had gone berserk in my shop had blown out the glass on the front door and cost the landlord a pretty penny in the insurance deductible. A fact he reminded me of every time I dropped off my rent check. Sabrina advanced on me, the light still blazing in her eyes. "I talked to some other ghosts around town, and they told me about you." Oh, brother. This ought to be good. Hayward took a valiant step forward, arms outstretched as if to intercede. "Madam, this is—" Sabrina ignored him, brushing right past him. "They said you can send me forward into this other world. Is that true?" My fingers loosened their grip on the iron handle. "I've helped spirits cross over, but it's not some easy flip of the switch thing. I can't snap my fingers and send you off into the next realm." "Then how does it work? How do I get out of this place?" The anger in her voice gave way to desperation. "I can't stay here another minute." "I'm not an expert," I started, my voice calm. "But like Gwen said at the funeral home, there's usually some sort of unfinished business keeping spirits here, in this realm, and the option to cross over only presents itself when the business is resolved. Now, seeing as you met death as the result of an act of violence, I'd guess that might be the thing holding you back. Do you have any idea who might have killed you? Any memory of that night at all?" "No, I told you. I woke up in that funeral home. I don't know what happened to me." She began to tremble, and her voice wavered. "Just set me free." Without warning, she swelled and then dissolved into a cloud of silver-hued particles. The mist scattered through the room until it became invisible, like dust settling back to the ground. Only the echo of her voice lingered, the word free resounding through the air for an unnerving second before it was swallowed up in silence. I blinked. What just happened? Everyone started talking at once. The half-dozen regulars, Gwen and Hayward, all offered up theories. "She dispersed!" Gwen exclaimed. "But how?" Loretta asked, staring at the place Sabrina had just stood. "There was no catalyst." "Can one self-disperse?" Hayward asked, also studying the place on the floor. I held up a hand. "Wait. If she dispersed, wouldn't she reboot back to where she first woke up as a ghost?" "It's likely. Or to a space she feels safe," Loretta replied. "The funeral home?" Gwen suggested. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was after hours. No one would be at the funeral home to let us inside. Well, no one would be there to let me inside. Gwen and the others could charge in without hesitation. "We'd better go check," I said, reaching for my keys. The front room of the funeral home was aglow when we arrived, Loretta, Gwen, and Hayward at my back. Flapjack preferred not to attend the weekly meetings, and the other attendees said goodbye as we left the flower shop. "Someone's working late," Gwen said. "I'll bet it's Carla. Poor thing hasn't had a date in over a year." I rolled my eyes. As someone who spent the majority of my life happily single, it grated when Gwen pitied the unattached as though they'd contracted an incurable disease. "Who's going inside?" I asked the trio of ghosts. "You're not coming with us, Lady Scarlet?" Hayward asked, concern etched in his distinguished face. "I don't have a good reason to be here," I replied. "Carla will think it's weird if I knock on the front door without cause." Hayward glanced up at the illuminated window. Perhaps you're right. Just go see if you can find Sabrina. If she wants to talk to me, I'll be out here." Gwen looped her arm through Hayward's and gently tugged him into motion. "Come on." Loretta hesitated. "I think I'll wait here with Scarlet." I glanced at her but didn't say anything. Hayward and Gwen surged through the doors and slipped inside the building. I stuffed my hands into the front pocket of my sweatshirt. The official beginning of autumn was still a few days away, but already the evenings had chilled dramatically from a week or two ago. Loretta swayed in place beside me, a nervous energy radiating from her, as she stared up at the historical home that had been converted to the town's funeral parlor somewhere along the way. "This is where my own memorial service was held," she said quietly. "It feels like only yesterday." In reality, nearly 12 years had passed since Loretta's death. She'd been alone in the library, drinking tea while she worked through a stack of book returns from the busy day, when she'd suffered a stroke. When her part-timer came in the next morning, he'd found her and called the paramedics, but there was nothing that could be done. She'd already gone. Loretta, in her new form, had hovered nearby, watching the scene but powerless to say or do anything. It was a tragic, though not uncommon, story. I'd heard variations of it dozens, perhaps hundreds of times before. "I'll bet it was a lovely service," I replied, giving her a small smile. Loretta's strong Type A bent could be trying, but at heart she was a sweet woman and had been beloved by the entire town while she'd been alive. She nodded. "It was. I remember being surprised at how many people attended. Some of them were children I'd read stories to on Saturday mornings, though now grown with children of their own." "You've left a beautiful legacy," I said, wishing she'd find the strength to fully leave it behind. She wasn't happy and thriving as a spirit like Gwen or Hayward. She spent her days wandering aimlessly, reminiscing about the past instead of looking to the future. Suddenly, the urge to take her hand swelled up inside me. Logically, I knew that I couldn't touch her, though there'd been times where I felt almost able to reach out and stroke Flapjack's fur. But that was because he'd been my cat in life, wasn't it? The urge thrummed through me, more urgently than before, and I reached for Loretta's hand. Our hands met, an electric shock radiating up my arm. Loretta looked up, her eyes round. "What are you—" Before she could finish her sentence, her eyes fluttered closed, and the sound of a long exhale filled my ears. I gripped her hand a little tighter, and then released it. Loretta faded, her semi-transparent form breaking apart into a silver-purple mist. A bright light followed, and I squinted against it. When my focus returned, I was alone on the sidewalk. "Loretta?" I whispered, already knowing she couldn't answer. She was gone. Crossed over. Well, that was a bust. I jumped at the sound of Gwen's voice and whipped around to find her and Hayward standing behind me. "The young woman wasn't inside, as far as we could tell," Hayward added with an apologetic look. "Where's Loretta?" Gwen asked. Hayward heaved a sigh. "Back to her library, I imagine. You know how agitated she gets when she's been away for too long." I stared, unblinking, at the place where she'd last stood, still not sure myself what had just happened. "Scarlet? Are you all right?" Gwen asked, concern threading her voice as she swooped a little closer. I was standing here, she was there, and then I touched her hand and she... poof!" "Lady Scarlet," Hayward said, thick eyebrows raised. "What are you saying?" I just helped her cross over to the other world." Chapter 5. Loretta's crossing echoed through my memory on a loop as I tossed and turned in bed. It didn't make any sense. She wasn't the first ghost I'd witnessed cross over, far from it. But she was the first one I'd actively participated in. In the past, I'd been a spectator. Why now? Reaper. I pressed my pillow against my ears, as if that could drown out the terrible word. It raked against my nerves and swirled my stomach in a way that made me feel out at sea on a less-than-seaworthy boat. The word was still there, tumbling through my mind, accompanied by terrible Grim Reaper silhouettes, accompanied by long sighs. "I am a shepherd," I reminded myself, fighting against the shadows. Loretta was ready to cross over. She'd been ready since I'd met her, when Gwen corralled her into one of the first meetings we'd held at Lily Pond. Loretta had hated being a ghost. All she'd ever done was hang around the library, reading over people's shoulders and wringing her hands every time someone misplaced a book or dog-eared a page. She could spout off for a solid hour of the daily infractions, as if they were being presented before a judge and jury. "He had the audacity to remove the dust jacket. A child in aisle 10 was sneaking Doritos from the front pocket of a backpack and put his cheese dust-riddled fingers all over the first edition Harry Potter hardback." On and on and on. And if I'd let her, she would have gone on like that for years, decades even. She was holding so tightly to her library that she would have lingered forever, waiting and watching, her anxiety and despair plaguing her until the end of time. I'd done her a favor. She was at peace now. I'd done my job. That's what it was, after all. I was a shepherd, and I'd successfully herded Loretta into the other world. And why did I feel so crappy about it? Ugh! I flipped the covers off and flipped on the bedside lamp. My black Lily Pond sweatshirt lay discarded at the foot of the bed, and I pulled it on. A pair of jeans and sneakers followed. I clicked off the light and tiptoed out into the hallway. According to the shiny tech watch Lucas had sent me a few weeks ago, it was 2:30 in the morning. Flapjack would be back from his gallivanting. Hayward tended to fall into a ghost sleep around midnight and would likely be snoring on the couch. Silently, I moved into the main living area, a 300-square-foot space comprised of a kitchen, dinette area, and a small living room. The one-bedroom apartment sat directly above my flower shop and was a little cramped for my taste. I wasn't a hoarder, despite what my mother might say, but I'd collected an array of trinkets and art pieces from my world travels and wished I had enough space to properly showcase them all. As it was, I had 3 storage boxes wedged into my closet and another one downstairs in the broom closet of the flower shop. Someday I'd have a home of my own and could finally unpack everything into artful displays rather than shove everything together on the squatty bookcase in my living room. Using the light from my smartwatch, I peeked over the back of the couch. Hayward wasn't there. That was odd. With a shrug, I went to the front door, not minding my footfalls. My fingers just grazed the knob when Flapjack's purr cut through the darkness. "Where are you going?" I stilled, mentally muttering a curse. I wanted to be alone with my thoughts, something Flapjack would not understand. I hit the switch beside the door and turned to find the Himalayan perched on the dining room table. I frowned. What have I said about getting on the table? It wasn't acceptable when you were alive, and you don't get a pass now that you're not. Off! With a roll of his silver eyes, he made a melodramatic show of getting down. "Happy?" he asked, as he sat on the floor, his thick tail swishing back and forth like a metronome. "Overjoyed," I replied flatly. "Where are you going? It's the middle of the night." I sighed. "I'm going to a rave. I've been meaning to try ecstasy for a while now." Flapjack scowled, his tail still. "Is this about the thing with that nerdy ghost lady?" "Her name is Loretta," I said, acid in my tone. I folded my arms. "And how do you even know about that?" "Gwen and Hayward said you were freaked out. He's staying out with her tonight to give you some space." "Then why are you here?" The cat flashed his teeth. "Got bored." "Do I even want to know what you were up to this evening?" If Flapjack was bored, that meant he'd run out of obnoxious pranks to pull. He particularly liked bothering Holly and the other residents of the Beechwood Manor at the other end of town. I'd given Holly my blessing to put up whatever wards or security measures she wanted around the stately home's perimeter, but she'd waved off my concern and assured me the supernatural residents could more than handle the cantankerous cat. "Probably not," Flapjack answered, a gleam in his eyes. "Though it appears the night's not over yet." "Who said you were invited?" "How are you planning on stopping me?" I threw my hands into the air. "Fine. Come along if you want. It's not anything exciting. I'm just going out for a drive." "A drive?" he repeated, strutting across the living room. Ignoring him, I opened the front door, then stepped through the door that led to the exterior staircase. Another narrower staircase led directly to my shop below, but I usually used the exterior that led directly to the side parking lot where my delivery van was parked. Flapjack was already in the passenger seat when I climbed behind the wheel. I frowned at him and turned over the engine. The van rumbled to life, and I backed out of the reserved space. Beechwood Harbor had a few late-night spots, but none of them were open at this hour. McNally's pub closed at midnight during the week, along with the pizza place. A little further outside town, there was a bar that would be open, but I didn't want a drink. Or, more accurately, I didn't want a drink with the type that would be hanging around a rural bar at 2:30 in the morning. That left the beach. I pointed the van toward my favorite lookout spot and flicked on the radio. Some pop song filtered through the speakers. I vaguely recognized it and hummed along. Anything to drown out the whirling thoughts. Flapjack stayed quiet, his tail moving in time with the beat. We drove past Beechwood Manor, and I noted an upstairs window was still lit up. I glanced at Flapjack, wondering if he was the reason someone was still awake. "It wasn't me," he said with a scowl. "I've left them alone since you told them about lemons. They started cleaning the wood floors with its awful stuff." He gagged. I smiled and kept driving up the hill. A little way away from the manor, there was an informal lookout area that provided spectacular views of the harbor in the day, especially at sunset. However, even at night, I liked to sit and watch the waves rolling along under the moon. There was something grounding about the ocean. Flapjack glanced at me when I pulled the lever for the parking brake. The engine was still rumbling, sending heat and music swirling around us. "What now?" "Now we sit." He glided through the air and sat on the dashboard. "You didn't do anything wrong, Scar. I know you're beating yourself up right now, but you shouldn't." I shrugged, not ready to let myself off the hook yet. Flapjack stilled. "How many whack job ghosts have we come across? Dozens. Now you finally have a way to help. To do something about the spirits that stay here too long and go nuts. The library ghost?" He paused, shifting his words at my glare. "I mean, Loretta wasn't going to move on by herself, right?" I hesitated, but then finally nodded in agreement. "At least I don't think she would have." "Then you were doing the right thing, putting her out of her misery before she could hurt herself or someone else." I scoffed. You make it sound like she was a rabid dog or something. Wasn't she? In a way. Flapjack poised the question with a hefty weight. You add 5 or 10 years and she'd be the next Rosie. And what if you weren't there to deal with the fallout? My lips pressed together. Was he right? He'd been at my side for several nasty fights with ghosts over the years. Ghosts who hung around too long after they were meant to go tended to come unhinged, and depending on the amount of power, the results could be quite devastating. Was I simply heading off the inevitable before it came to pass? Maybe this is all part of your gift. You've been twisted up about it since you talked to that voodoo lady in New Orleans. I know you have. I smiled gently at the cat. We rarely saw eye to eye, but there was no arguing that he knew me better than anyone. He was the only constant in my life, mostly a constant pain in the butt. He'd watched me grow up, travel the world, and he'd been there when I'd settled down and planted some roots, fallen in love. Scar, this power, whatever it's capable of, would normally scare the bejeebies out of me. But I'm not scared, because I know you. Your only intentions are good and fair, and you'll do the right thing. You've just got to decide how deep you want to go with it. I bobbed my head as my eyes navigated back toward the ocean. On the way back to the flower shop, I drove past the funeral home. Carla, or whomever had been awake on the evening's earlier visit, had gone home, leaving the funeral home's interior dark. Yellow light spilled across its facade from the streetlights, and 2 spotlights illuminated the wooden sign posted in the center of the neatly manicured front yard. I'm assuming you know about Sabrina, too? I asked Flapjack, as I slowed to a crawl before the historic home. She's the murdered ghost? I nodded, my foot shifting back to the gas pedal. I picked up speed, still looking up at the funeral home. I'm worried about her. She's got a lot of emotions. And as we've seen, a figure appeared in the headlights. My heart rocketed out of my chest, and I slammed my foot on the brakes. The van pulled to the right and stopped right before I hit the woman. Only then did reality catch up with my mind, and I realized that it wasn't a human standing there. It was a ghost. Sabrina Hutchins, to be more specific. And she didn't look happy. Now that I've got your attention, she snapped, cutting through the hood of the van as she surged forward, stopping just short of sticking her head through the windshield. Sabrina, I'm sorry about what happened back at my shop. It was your first meeting. There's a lot to unpack. I'm sure if you come back next week, we can... No, I don't want to be here next week. I want out. I'm sorry, but I can't... They said you could. Who? Your friends. The old-timer English guy and the hippie chick. I looked at Flapjack. His lip was curled back. Those morons. I closed my eyes, wishing I'd stayed in my bed. I don't know what you heard, but this isn't something I can do. I can help you try to figure out what's tethering you here, but I can't snap my fingers and send you somewhere else. It was technically true, but I winced anyway. I hated lying. I was murdered, Sabrina shrieked. Everyone says that's why I'm stuck here. Please, they already took my life away from me. I can't stay here reliving it over and over. The desperation in her eyes plucked at my heartstrings. But right along with it, it tugged at the nest of worries over Loretta and the depth of my power. I don't even know if I could do it again, I sighed. For all I know, that whole thing was a fluke. So it is true, Sabrina snapped, calling out my earlier lie. I hung my head. Scar, we don't have to stay, Flapjack muttered out of the corner of his mouth. Step on it. We'll be back home in 2 minutes. Please, Sabrina opined. You're the only chance I've got. I'll make you a deal, I told her, holding up one hand to stop her pleading. I'll come back tomorrow afternoon, and if you still want to go, I'll see if I can help. But I want you to take tonight and tomorrow morning to really think about it. Sabrina's eyes lit up, and she nodded vigorously. I will. Thank you. Okay. I lifted a hand and gestured for her to scoot away from the van. Technically speaking, I couldn't hurt her, but driving over someone, ghost or not, just seemed wrong. Flapjack held his peace until we parked outside the flower shop. "Let me handle Gwen and Hayward," he said in a low, almost menacing voice. "They didn't mean any harm," I started. "It doesn't matter. You have to guard yourself, Scarlet. You think you have problems now, with ghosts bugging you and pushing your boundaries? If word spreads about your new power, you're going to have more than just restless spirits to worry about." With that, he hopped out of the passenger side door, leaving me alone with the echo of his warning. Chapter 6. "Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of leads on the case," Chief Lincoln said, his expression still holding on to his initial surprise over my random visit to his office at the police station. "We've not given up on the case, of course, but right now, we've conducted all the interviews, searched the scene, and processed the clues, and we're working on finding the next step forward." I nodded, trying to mask my disappointment. The pending appointment with Sabrina had overwhelmed my efforts to work, so I ducked out early and left Lizzie in charge of the shop. On a whim, I'd driven to the police station to see if maybe there was some new tidbit or promise of information that I could use to coax Sabrina into staying and seeing through the resolution of her murder. So far, that plan was up in flames, and I didn't have a backup. "Who was it you said you spoke with?" Chief Lincoln asked. Oops, that was my cue. I'd convinced him to talk about the case based on the premise that Sabrina's family member asked me to look into it. A paper-thin story, but one the chief bought, at least to a point. Judging by the line between his brows, the facade was crumbling quickly. "Her mother. She called to thank me for the flowers and asked if I'd heard anything." As much as I hated lying, I had to admit it came a lot more naturally than in the past, a fact that bothered me. Well, I'll give her a call if you think I should. Though, like I said, there isn't much of an update." "Oh, no, that's okay. I wouldn't bother her. I told her I'd call." Chief Lincoln studied me. "Uh-huh." I popped up from the visitor's chair across from his desk and snatched my purse off the floor. "Thanks for your time, Chief. I should get going, though. Lots of deliveries to make, you know." He waved politely as I turned away to scurry out of his office. My cheeks warmed as I cut through the bullpen. I could feel the officers looking at me, wondering what it was I'd been discussing with the chief. I didn't suppose they'd believe we'd been talking about his pending boutonniere order. Back in the van, I exhaled and sagged against the steering wheel. Chief Lincoln had said Sabrina's neighbor had been the one to find her and call in her murder. I didn't know where she'd lived, only that it wasn't inside Beechwood Harbor city limits. Chief Lincoln was helping the force in Pine Shoals, a neighboring town that was even smaller than the harbor. I'd never been to the small town and didn't have Sabrina's former address. There weren't any handholds available for me to even attempt to grab onto. "Are we on a stakeout?" I nearly hit the ceiling at Flapjack's sudden appearance. He cackled. "One of these days, you're going to give me a real bona fide heart attack. Then what will you do?" I growled at him. He smiled. "I fully intend on haunting you even after you're dead, Scar. I figured you knew that by now." I rolled my eyes. "Wow, I can't wait." He wheezed a purr/laugh. "Admit it, you're looking forward to it." "To what, being dead?" "Shockingly, no. I'm pretty good with things as is." I shook my head in disbelief. "Honestly, Flapjack, sometimes I think your head got screwed on backward at Ghost Headquarters." "Think of all the snooping you can do when you're dead," he continued, undeterred. "It's like one big stakeout." "I'm not snooping, and this is not a stakeout." I gestured up at the police station. "I was just in a meeting with Chief Lincoln." "Trying to get info on the dead chick?" I sighed and leaned back. "In the past, when we've dealt with murder cases, the soul was able to move on as soon as the murder was solved. It's likely the same with Sabrina. If she can just be patient long enough to get the truth, it would be enough to set her free, without my help." "Maybe, but there's no guarantee this thing gets solved." "That's pessimistic." He tilted his head. "Not every story gets a happy ending, Scar. You know that." I started the van, still weighing my options. Suddenly, an idea sparked, and I perked. My gaze slid sideways and landed on the fluff ball in the passenger seat. I can't get info, but if I recall, I know someone who's good at getting info from police stations. Flapjack sighed. What do you want to know? Smiling, I turned off the van's engine. Sabrina's neighbor is the one who found her. I'd like to know what else they might know about her. See if you can find their name and address. If not, then just Sabrina's address will do. Flapjack muttered under his breath, something that included the words bad and idea. But he hopped through the side of the van and started up the sloped parking lot that spread out in front of the station. As he trotted away, I made the mental note to ask where he'd even learned to read. It was one of those questions that came up so infrequently that I always forgot to get around to asking. Likely because by the time I needed Flapjack to intervene, things were already off the rails and didn't slow down till the final crash, after which I forgot all about the ghost cat's unnatural ability. The digital clock on the van's dashboard counted off the minutes. 5, 10, 15. By 18, I was ready to drive off without the ghost cat and let him catch up to me later. The only problem was I had no direction. I could head to Pine Shoals, but if Flapjack got distracted or disinterested in the mission, he was a cat after all, I'd be stuck waiting around there too. Finally, his infuriating little self slipped through the station's front door. He wove through the incoming postal carrier's legs before brushing up against her and flashing his teeth in a grin as she shivered. Honestly, I muttered, shaking my head. He popped into the passenger seat and I glared at him. What is the matter with you? What? He asked, feigning innocence. His large eyes went round. The Puss in Boots thing doesn't work on me, remember? He scoffed. I was just having a little fun. It's not like I can hurt someone by touching them. Thank Hades for that, or whoever it is that comes up with these rules. I turned on the van. All right, where are we going? Before I give you the information, I think a little negotiating is in order. My knuckles went white as I gripped the wheel. Flapjack? Come on, Scar. Sweeten the deal a little. He grinned. I squinted at him. I'll buy 2 cans of tuna, open them, and leave them on the back porch for 2 days. He considered it with a slight tilt of his head. If you leave it outside, I have to contend with all the street cats. I rolled my eyes. You think you'd have compassion on those in need? In need? Have you seen the size of that black and white? His belly drags on the ground. It's unbecoming of a cat. I shrugged. I kind of like him. Flapjack scowled. The ultimate threat would be adopting a flesh and blood feline to reside in the apartment. Flapjack would come unglued. The landlord would slap me with ridiculous fees if I wanted to have a pet, but sometimes I thought it might be worth it just to watch Flapjack squirm. This was one of those times. Fine, I countered, my tone sharp. Tuna in the house 1 day, then it gets put outside and you can enjoy it until the others find it. That's my best offer. The Himalayan mulled it over, his tail sweeping through the air. Flapjack? I ground my teeth. It was already 4:30 in the afternoon. I didn't want to show up at some stranger's door right in the middle of their dinner if I could help it. Fine. It's a deal. Swell. I reached for my phone and mounted it on the magnetized docking station. Address? He rattled it off, and I punched it into my GPS app. When will the tuna be available? He asked once we were moving. Tomorrow, all right? Fine. As a ghost, Flapjack couldn't enjoy the taste of fish, but for whatever reason, smelling it was nearly as satiating. He took daily trips to the docks when the catch of the day was brought in, and he still mourned the closure of the town's small cannery several months before. Personally, if I couldn't actually enjoy something, I didn't want the smell of it to tempt me. It was like trying to avoid sugar, for health and longevity and all that jazz. If I was sworn off sweets, the last thing I wanted was to walk by a bakery. It was torture. I couldn't fully imagine myself one day walking the earth as a literal spirit of wanderlust, but if I ever found myself in the position, maybe I'd take to haunting bakeries. In my experience, stranger things happened all the time. Pine Shoals was a 30-minute drive outside Beechwood Harbor. I played the radio. and cringed at Flapjack's off-key sing-along. When we arrived at the address, I parked across the street. To anyone looking out their window, they'd assume I was there to deliver flowers to one of their neighbors. The Lily Pond van was the perfect decoy vehicle, as far as I was concerned. "Is that one Sabrina's?" I asked Flapjack, gesturing at the house to the left of the neighbors. Its flower beds were pristinely kept, but from the look of things, the grass hadn't been mowed in a couple of weeks. This time of year, it dumped rain by the buckets, so the grass could go from manicured to jungle in less than a month. Sabrina's murder had taken place almost 2 weeks ago. Flapjack leaned forward, reading the numbers. "That's it." The police tape had been taken down. I imagined it wouldn't be too long before a "for sale" sign was planted in the dense grass. Her parents lived in Minnesota, and her ex-husband and daughter had a house of their own in the next town over. "What's the neighbor's name?" I asked Flapjack, still studying Sabrina's home. Had she been back to her home since that night? Had she reset to the scene of the crime the night before, after her meltdown in my flower shop? On the one hand, it was her home, her sanctuary away from the world. But that sanctuary had been violated. Any comfort she might have found there would be ripped away now. Any happy memories she'd made there would be drowned out by that horrible night. Wouldn't they? "Barry Wentworth." "Any other info?" "He's the one who found the body. According to him, our ghoul pal—" "Sabrina," I corrected, sliding him an evil eye. "Fine. Sabrina had the flu. He was taking her some soup and a few DVDs to borrow. He knocked and she didn't come to the door. He figured she was asleep, so he went back home. A few hours later, he tried calling. No answer. Says he had a bad feeling about it and went back over, went inside, and found her. Dead." "The door was unlocked?" I asked. "He had a key. Apparently, he was in charge of her houseplants and cat whenever she'd go out of town for work." "Oh. Do the cops know how the killer got inside?" "I don't know." "Flapjack, you were in there for a good 20 minutes. What were you doing?" A glint reflected in his silver eyes. "You know what? Never mind. I don't want to know." I threw open my door and hopped out of the van. "What's your cover story here, Scar?" Flapjack asked, appearing at my ankles. "You need a good alter ego name." What about Inspector Rose? Florist by day, crime-fighting gumshoe by night. "When should I expect the graphic novel?" I deadpanned. He wheezed a happy purr, satisfied with himself. It was a valid question, though, one I'd toyed with during the drive over. Unfortunately, I hadn't come up with an answer yet. There wasn't a good, plausible reason for me to be poking around in Sabrina's murder investigation, and I sure as Hades wasn't going to start telling people I'd spoken with her ghost. I'd had mixed results with people's reactions to my powers in the past. Some, like Lucas, were positive, though a little cautious. Others offered me fame and fortune, but the vast majority thought I was a nutcase, and a possible danger to myself and others. One psychotic break away from a crime spree orchestrated by the voices in my head. Maybe Inspector Rose is off the table, but Journalist Rose could work. I smiled at Flapjack. "What's that little paper called? You know, the one I used to kill flies in the shop." "Ah, the little gem that's known as the Harbor Hubbub," Flapjack replied, amusement in his tone. I snapped my fingers. "Yes, well, for the day, I'm Scarlet Rose, with the esteemed press." "Impersonating a journalist? Nice. I always knew one day you'd fully cross over to the dark side." I frowned down at him. "Fully? As in I have a toe over the line as it is?" "Oh, you have more than a toe, Scar." He smiled. "But that's what I like about you." He winked out of sight, materializing on the other side of the street after a car passed by. I sputtered a muttered counterpoint under my breath as I marched across the street. "You're wrong," I told him in summary when I reached the opposite sidewalk. "You really do make it easy, Scar. It's starting to take some of the fun out of it. Maybe I'll stick to badgering Hayward." "Ugh, why I even let you come with me?" "I'm the one with the address, remember?" Yeah. Well, you're in danger of losing your tuna privileges." "You wouldn't." "Hey," I said with a grin, "you're the one who said I'm walking on the dark side. Seems like just the kind of thing I'd do." Chapter 7. Barry Wentworth was a middle-aged man with disheveled sandy blonde hair, close-set eyes, and a long, sharp nose. In a weird way, he reminded me of Roger from Disney's 101 Dalmatians. But that could have just been the sweater vest and the old-school pipe dangling from his mouth. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and gruff. A prickly pear. Your favorite, Scar," Flapjack said, looking the man over before slipping past his ankles. I forced my eyes up to meet Barry's and extended my hand. "My name is Scarlet Rose, and I'm a reporter with the Harbor Hubbub, a local paper in Beechwood Harbor. Do you have a few minutes to talk with me about the Sabrina Hutchins case?" "Tell him he needs to hire a maid," Flapjack called from somewhere in the house. I cringed. "A reporter?" Barry said, giving me a once-over. There was nothing leery about it, but I took a small step back all the same. "I've already told the police everything I remember from that horrible night." "Right, well, I'm writing a piece more about Sabrina, who she was as a person." Another apprising glance. "You got a card?" "A card?" "Sure," I said, automatically patting at the pockets of my jeans. "Oh, shoot. I just gave the last one out. Would you like to speak with my editor?" I pulled my cell phone out, readying to dial and desperately hoping he wouldn't call my bluff. Barry considered me a moment longer and then shook his head. "That's fine. I don't imagine this will be a long interview." No, just a few minutes of your time." He stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come on inside. I just put on a pot of coffee if you want a mug." Hesitantly, I followed him into the house, closing the front door behind me. Flapjack wasn't kidding about the maid suggestion, though. From the looks of things, he'd give any housekeeper a run for their money if they hoped to do their job and keep their sanity. The house wasn't just dingy, but cluttered, and held the odor of several days' worth of dirty dishes and empty takeout boxes. From a quick look, it appeared that Barry existed on a diet of delivery pizza, Chinese food, and frozen waffles drenched in syrup. Flapjack wandered down the hallway off the living room, leaving me alone with Barry. "How do you take your coffee?" he asked, heading into the kitchen. Black is fine." I didn't plan on drinking it anyway. While he puttered in the kitchen, I picked through the stacks of boxes lining one wall. Old magazines filled at least 24 banker boxes. National Geographic, Popular Science, Time, even People. A baby grand piano was the only untouched surface. In fact, as I neared it, I realized it wasn't only free of the clutter that plagued the rest of the room, but it was spotless. Freshly polished to a shine. Not a speck of dust on the keys. "Do you play?" I whipped around to face Barry as he came into the room, pipe clenched between his teeth as he carried a mug in each hand. He passed one to me, and I noted the chipped edge. The whole picture was confusing. Barry's home was by no means small and resided in a nice neighborhood. The outside was well-maintained, and the car in the driveway looked like it was fairly new. But the inside, save the piano, was an absolute mess, and the mugs we held were battered and faded. "I don't," I answered, gesturing with my free hand back toward the piano. "It's lovely, though. It's the one thing I always wish I'd learned." My wife was the musician," he explained, his gaze hitched on the piano for a long moment. "What is it you'd like to know about Sabrina?" We took our seats opposite one another, me on the love seat, he in a large recliner that appeared to be his usual spot in the large room, judging by the mounded contents of the ashtray set on the small table beside it. "It's my understanding that you two are friends. Is that right?" I started, lowering the mug of coffee to my knee. "Something like that," Barry replied. He set the pipe aside and sipped from the coffee. "We'd been neighbors for 5 years or so. We both bought our homes here when they were first built. They're the same floor plan, just mirrored." I nodded politely. "What was she like? Did she have any hobbies or belong to any clubs?" "She was a mom," Barry replied. "Sabrina's life revolved around the girl, Miranda. Soccer practice, prom dress shopping, field trips, PTA, all that." "Did she enjoy it?" He offered a small shrug. "Seemed to." "I read that she traveled often for work." He nodded to confirm. "Did she enjoy that, traveling?" Barry took a long, thoughtful sip of coffee. "Not really. She didn't like being away from home. Sabrina was a nice woman and a good neighbor. She'll be missed around here. You might interview some of the other neighbors for your piece. Everyone in this development is pretty close. There's a monthly potluck dinner at the community clubhouse." "That's nice," I said with a genuine smile. Barry shrugged again. I leaned forward, holding the mug with both hands as I braced my elbows on my thighs. Mr. Wentworth, off the record, do you have any idea who might have wanted to hurt her? Barry bristled at the question. It's fairly obvious, isn't it? I blinked. Cases like these? It's always the same story. The ex. Barry put his coffee aside and picked up the pipe. He stuck the stem into the corner of his mouth. They were in a big custody battle. He got some fancy job offer in California, but their original divorce paperwork says he has to stay close enough for Miranda to see him every other weekend. He wanted to give up his weekend visits and take the whole summer, so the girl would go to live with him full-time in the summer. Sabrina wasn't having it. They were set to go to court next month. He paused and blew out a ring of thick smoke, then pinned me with a serious stare. With Sabrina out of the way, he wins. Flapjack strutted back into the room, his tail alert. His whiskers twitched at the smell of pipe tobacco. You getting anything out of Beanpole Baggins here, or can we get going? I shot a frown at him. Do you know her ex? Were they married when they moved into the neighborhood? Not for very long. They separated probably a year or so after moving in. As far as I could tell, things were already pretty far gone by that point. He cheated on her, and she kicked him out. It should have been cut and dried, but he fought for custody, and that dragged out for a long time. It took a toll on Sabrina. Maybe that's why she tried so hard to be a supermom. A sadness clung to the air following Barry's words, and my heart sank. I'd give it my best shot, but the glimmer of hope that I'd be able to talk Sabrina into sticking around had turned to dust. After thanking Barry for his time, I left his home and returned to my van. He watched from the front window of his living room, and I offered a friendly wave. He probably thought it was odd that I was climbing into a flower delivery van when I was supposed to be a journalist, but quickly decided it likely wasn't that odd. After all, writing for a tiny local paper hardly conjured the image of champagne bottles popping and a Scrooge McDuck pool of gold coins. Girls gotta eat. Blech, Flapjack sputtered, waving his tail around as if he could disperse the air around him. I was about to gag if we had to stay there for another minute. Who smokes that foul stuff? Good luck getting that stench out of your hair and clothes. You're probably going to have to burn that sweatshirt. I laughed and pulled away from the curb. Just be glad you don't have literal fur. I'd have to dunk you in the sink. Flapjack shuddered. Where are we going now? Are you going to talk to the other neighbors? It'll be 5 o'clock by the time we get back to Beechwood Harbor. Sabrina's going to be expecting us. Besides, I don't think there's much more we can glean from talking to the other neighbors. At least nothing that's going to convince Sabrina to stay. So what's the plan then? You're really going to cross her over like you did with Loretta? I exhaled slowly. I'll hold to my bargain. If I can't convince her to stay, then I'll do my best to ferry her over to the next realm. Flapjack settled into the passenger seat, his eyes trained forward. Maybe you should talk to your witchy friend first. I shot him a look. What about all that stuff you said last night, about trusting me with this power? I do, Scar, but still, this feels like a big step. What if there is some kind of repercussion we don't know about yet? Like what? That's the point, he countered. We don't know. I shook my head. I don't think so. Maybe if I was trying to shove spirits through, but with Loretta and now Sabrina, they're ready to go. And like you said, if this is a way to cross over unhappy ghosts, it will ultimately save us and a lot of other people a bunch of problems in the future. No manifesting, no poltergeisting, just a peaceful coexistence. As for Holly, I continued, she didn't even know what soul shepherding was. That was all Lila's information. So as much as I respect Holly's wisdom, on this one, she's out of her depth too. Flapjack didn't press his argument. I turned on the radio and we rode back to Beechwood Harbor in tense silence. As much as I tried to rationalize that the only reason I was worried was because I was doing something new, I couldn't fully shake the anxiety away. A handful of minutes past 5, we pulled up in front of the funeral home. You coming with? I asked Flapjack. I'm in it now, he said, not sounding thrilled about it. Not that I could blame him. I climbed out of the van and shut the door, taking a cautious look up and down the street. It was still light outside and would be for another few hours. Not the ideal place to host this reverse seance. I should have told her to meet me at the shop after hours, I muttered. Flapjack rounded the front bumper and stood beside me. Maybe she had a change of heart? Maybe. I'd expected Sabrina to meet us outside, the same place where we'd met the night before, but there was no sign of her. Should we go inside? I wondered out loud. I could collect any of the vases left behind from her service. Worth a shot. But if she doesn't show up in the next 10 minutes, I say we get out of here and make a pit stop at the market on the way. You owe me a can of tuna, remember? How could I forget? I muttered. Flapjack followed behind me as I crossed the street. Now the real question is, albacore or yellowfin? I lifted my eyes to the puffy white clouds above, pleading silently for an extra dose of sanity. Scarlet, what a surprise! Carla greeted from behind the large oak desk that sat off to the side of the home's foyer. Hello, Carla. I hope I'm not bothering you, I said, closing the door behind me. A gentle chime sounded. Not at all. I'm just catching up on paperwork. What can I do for you? Before I could answer, Sabrina appeared, floating in from the wall behind Carla. So, she'd mastered at least one of her new ghost skills. That had to be a positive sign, right? I've been waiting all afternoon, Sabrina whined. I forced my eyes off her and smiled at Carla. I was just passing by and thought I'd stop in and see if there was anything left over from the service the other night that I could get out of your way. Oh, of course. Carla stood. The family took the smaller arrangements, but they left the two larger ones in the hurricane vases. I'll help you with them. Carla stepped out from behind the desk, only to be reeled back in when the phone rang. Shoot, I have to get this. I'm waiting on a call. I waved a hand. No problem, I'll be fine. Thank you, though. Carla smiled, picked up the phone, and sank back to her seat as she answered the call. Beechwood Funeral Home, this is Carla speaking. How may I help you? Not waiting, I scuttled down the hall into the viewing room. It didn't appear they'd had a service since Sabrina's, but the room was clean and smelled of wood polish. The easel was folded against the wall, my florist's foam likely discarded along with the flowers. Two empty hurricane vases were on the antique table off to one side of the room. Sabrina shimmered into view as Flapjack popped up on the table between the two vases. I haven't changed my mind, she declared, almost proudly. I want you to send me on, to whatever happens next. I bobbed my head and then quickly licked my lips. I had one last shot to try and change her mind. I spoke with your neighbor, Barry, today. That's why I was late. Sabrina's face registered surprise. Why did you do that? I wanted to find out more about your life. He told me that you traveled a lot for work. She nodded, even as her brows pinched together. So, I thought maybe you'd want to do some more traveling. He said you never got to fully appreciate the places you went because you were there on business. But now that's all gone. You could go travel the world, see everything you never got a chance to. My friend Hayward Kensington III could tell you all the best places to see in England. Maybe he could be your tour guide, Flapjack suggested brightly. You could take him off our hands. Rely on his expertise for months. I shot a pointed look at the cat. He gave a wicked flick of his tail, returning my scowl with a grin. I told you I don't want to do any of that, Sabrina replied tartly. You know, I'm beginning to think you're all hot air. Carla's voice floated down the hall. She was still on the phone, but there was no way of telling how long she'd be occupied. And I got the feeling that Sabrina would balk if I suggested a second meeting place. I glanced over at Flapjack. It was now or never. Drawing in a deep breath, I held up both hands. All right. Close your eyes, I told the woman. Once Sabrina's eyes were closed, I reached out for her hand, just as I had with Loretta. The impulse wasn't there, but when my hand neared hers, a spark of some foreign energy buzzed. The room faded as my vision blurred around the edges. My heart raced into a panicked frenzy, and I snapped out of it right before my legs buckled underneath me. The room spun, and when I blinked away the fog, I realized I was alone. Sabrina had gone. Only a slight shimmer remained before she vanished altogether. My spine stiffened at the sound of footsteps in the hall. I twisted around, just as Carla came to a stop in the doorway, a smile on her face. "Scarlet, did you need a—" She stopped short, the smile melting like hot wax. "What's going on here?" she asked, alarm sending her voice an octave higher than normal. To anyone else, the scene would appear normal. The lights weren't flickering, chairs weren't artfully arranged in a tower in the center of the room, and there were no spooky sound effects accompanying the transition. At least, that's what I'd thought. Judging by the look on Carla's face, I'd thought wrong. Her eyes were huge and round, and anchored on the place Sabrina had just stood. There was no doubt that she'd just seen the spirits crossing. But how? "Was that Sabrina?" Carla asked. Not waiting for an answer, her eyes flashed and then narrowed into slits, threatening to cut me to the core. "What did you do?" Chapter 8. "How do you— You saw that. You saw her," I sputtered, the words a jumbled mess. Carla folded her arms over her chest. "She told me about this ridiculous plan. I didn't think you'd actually be stupid enough to go through with it." Carla huffed, shaking her head like an agitated horse. "Honestly, Scarlet, what were you thinking? Do you even realize what you've done?" No. But I wasn't going to tell her that. "Hold the phone," I barked. "How do you even know about any of this?" Carla took a deep breath, and I got the impression it was the only thing keeping her from flying across the room and throttling me. Her eyes were still angry as they circled back to mine. "I'm a summoner." "A summoner?" "Yes," Carla snapped. "I'm in a lower class, meaning I can't bring anything from the other world back to this realm, but I can conjure those on the other side and commune with them. Mostly humans, though I've spoken with a demon or two in my day." My jaw felt permanently unhinged. "Demons? That's it, I'm out of here," Flapjack said, jumping down from the table. "I have to admit, a talking cat is a new one, even for me," Kara said. Flapjack froze. "How long has he been with you? Is he your familiar?" I shook my head, blinking rapidly. No, I'm not a witch." Flapjack sniffed, staring up at Carla. "I'm not anyone's magic security bouncer, and I'm not a familiar. He was my childhood pet," I explained. My mind was still spinning at 300 miles an hour, but the story of how Flapjack had come to be was a story I'd told dozens of times and could recite without much effort. "And incidentally, my first ghost. I was 8. Carla studied me with interest, some of the hostility fading. "So what are you then? If not a witch, what? You don't look like a shifter." I wasn't sure what that was supposed to mean, but I didn't think it was a compliment. "I'm a ghost whisperer," I told her. "At least that's the title I've chosen for myself." Flapjack gave me a quick look, but didn't question my decision to hold back the truth of my power. "No," Carla said, shaking her head. "That's not it. Or at least that's not all. I just watched you send a soul forward into the next realm. That's magic. Powerful magic. What are you really?" "Who died and made you the queen of Ghost Town?" Flapjack asked, stalking toward Carla. "Scarlet doesn't answer to you or anyone else." "Flapjack." The ghost didn't heed my low warning. He stopped right before Carla and whipped his tail through the air. "The ghost wanted to leave. She begged Scarlet to help her move on. So that's what Scarlet did. She helped her. That's what she does. She helps ghosts. You got a problem with that? Or is it more that this is your turf and you don't want someone else in the supernatural spotlight?" Carla stared at Flapjack for a long moment, locked in some kind of staring contest, which, for the record, is never a winning idea, seeing as how ghosts don't biologically have to blink. "Enough, you two. Listen, Carla, I'm sorry if this crossed a line, but Flapjack is right. Sabrina asked me to help her cross over, and so I did. It's really as simple as that." Carla's eyes snapped back up to meet mine. She snorted. "Simple? Oh, no. This is anything but simple. You really have no idea what you've just done, do you?" I crossed my arms, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "My friend is a witch. She lives here in Beechwood Harbor. She's never told me about you, and I'm pretty sure she knows all the supernatural, beings in town." "I'm not a being," Carla said, clearly taking umbrage with the term. "I am a person. And as for Holly, or at least that's who I'm assuming you're talking about, she doesn't know everything. I keep my powers to myself. I don't go broadcasting my talents to every vamp, shifter, and ghost in town. Most of the time, the ghosts here don't even know I can see them. I make it a point to ignore them and not interfere with the natural cycle of things." I frowned at the not-so-subtle dig. Carla crossed the room, knelt, and folded back one corner of the long aisle runner that stretched between the wooden folding chairs that were usually set up for services. She popped up a loose floorboard and pulled out a shoebox-sized safe. Without looking at me, she dialed in the passcode, opened the door, and pulled out a small canvas satchel. Flapjack looked up at me, and I shrugged. Carla replaced the safe and the floorboard and kicked the carpet back into place. She stood and opened the satchel. "What are you—" "Shh!" she hissed. My fists clenched a little tighter as I looked toward the exit. I'd never heard of a summoner before, but found it hard to believe that Carla would stop me from leaving. My van was parked right out front. I could make a run for it and be back home in 5 minutes flat. Granted, in a town the size of Beechwood Harbor, it wasn't likely we'd never run into each other again. Could we go on like this night had never happened, passing with polite, if not guarded, smiles at the store or post office? I doubted it. Carla had begun removing items from the satchel and placing them on the door a foot or so in front of the wooden pulpit. With each new object, she formed a small circle, about the diameter of a hula hoop. The objects were all different. A rose quartz, black tourmaline, a blood-red pillar candle, a bunch of some type of dried herb, and a golden pyramid that looked like a gift store trinket from a King Tut exhibit. But something told me it was far more than a cheesy paperweight souvenir. When she finished, she placed the satchel on one of the wooden chairs. The circle was nearly complete, but there was a large space between the pyramid and the first crystal she'd placed. Carla stepped to the empty space, careful not to cross some invisible line linking all the objects together. Her gaze looked far away as she lifted her hands and removed the pendant necklace from around her own neck. From across the room, I couldn't see the shape of the pendant and couldn't even remember her wearing it, which was odd in itself, as I always had an eye for jewelry, especially funky, unique pieces. Carla placed the pendant in its place amongst the other items, and no sooner had it touched the floor than a golden line appeared, shooting from one item to the next, like a quick flame blazing up a line of gunpowder. When the final line connected, a strange hum echoed through the room, and it felt as though the temperature had dropped a good 10 degrees instantaneously. "Scar?" Flapjack said nervously, coming to stand beside me. Carla looked up from the circle, and the golden light reflected in her normally hazel eyes. "I call forth Sabrina Hutchins, who left this world today to cross over. Show her to me." Carla closed her eyes and muttered something else in a language I didn't understand. The words were strange and twisted, not like anything I'd ever heard before in all of my travels. Goosebumps broke out along my arms, and the hair on Flapjack's back stood on end. Suddenly, Carla's eyes snapped open, and another low hum filled the room. The circle of light pulsed, and then Sabrina's ghost appeared, just as it had been minutes ago before I sent her across. "You!" she demanded, her eyes locking on mine. "What did you do to me? What is this place?" Carla looked at me, the gold drained from her eyes. "She can hear you." Slowly, I lowered my arms and took a tentative step closer toward the circle. "Sabrina, where are you?" "I don't know, but this is not what I signed up for. It's worse than being there, stuck on Earth. At least there I had people to talk to. This place is empty, desolate. There's nothing and no one. I don't understand. How could that be right? That can't be all there is on the other side." Even as I said it, I realized that I had no proof. No one who had ever crossed over had ever come back, at least as far as I knew. Sure, every religion had their theories and sacred beliefs about what happened after death, but no one knew or could prove what was waiting for all of us once we left this world behind. Panic fluttered through me. What had I done? Carla, what does this mean? I asked, barely able to muster a whisper. Her spirit wasn't ready to cross, and you forced her over, Carla said. Sabrina turned to her. You can see me? I've tried to talk to you for days now. It's not that I'm unsympathetic, Carla told her, but I have a business to run, a life to live. Do you have any idea how many spirits I see come through here? If I tried to stop and help all of them, I'd never have time for anything else. Besides that, there is an order to things, as I was explaining to Scarlett before calling you here. I told you I was leaving, Sabrina said. Why didn't you tell me this is what would happen to me if I did? Carla shrugged. For one, I didn't think Scarlett had that kind of power. Sure, I've heard about your affection for ghosts and know all about your support group. It's admirable, really. But I had no idea you'd moved into taking more forceful measures. And secondly, it's not my job to babysit specters. Then why are you doing any of this? I asked, anger seeping into my tone. You just want to rub my mistake in my face? I'm educating you, Carla said coolly. Additionally, you've created a problem that needs to be solved. If Sabrina remains in limbo for too long, there's a good chance a demon will find her and use its magic to cross through into this world. Carla might as well have socked me in the gut with a bowling ball. What? Think of it this way. Normally, the other world and this world are separated by a piece of glass. It's strong, and it would take a lot to break through. Your average garden-variety demon wouldn't be able to punch through. Limbo, on the other hand, is separated from this world by a piece of plastic wrap. It wouldn't take much to pierce the barrier and slide into this world. Flapjack jerked his head up to look at me. Terror filled his wide eyes. If a demon gets through, they'll first appear here, where Sabrina was shoved through, and then it becomes my problem. So I'm telling you all this in hopes that you'll set about making this right before that happens. Yes, of course. Just tell me what to do, I replied. What happens to me? Sabrina asked. The desperation in her voice raked across my nerves. Carla lowered her eyes. The demon will use your soul as its ticket out of limbo, and you'll be gone. Forever. Sabrina broke into sobs, and my heart squeezed. I won't let that happen, I told her. How long do we have? Carla shrugged. We could have weeks. It could be months. It just depends on how long it takes a demon to find Sabrina and realize she could be their ticket out. What about Loretta? Flapjack asked, speaking for the first time since Carla began the circle. Will she be some kind of demon trap too? Who is Loretta? Carla asked, tenseness straining her voice. I pinched my eyes closed, willing myself to wake up from the nightmare unfolding before me. Scarlett, Carla snapped. I forced myself to meet her eyes. Last night, I helped another ghost cross over. I think she was ready. But I did the same thing as with Sabrina. Carla swore, her nostrils flaring. Any others I should know about? I shook my head. No, just the two. What is her full name? Loretta Mays. And she crossed over yesterday? I nodded. Carla muttered another incantation in the strange, gnarled language and squeezed her eyes closed. She waited a moment, and then repeated the words. Still nothing. Her shoulders relaxed as her eyes fluttered open. She's not in limbo. She's moved on properly. The revelation should have made me feel better, and to a point it did, but it came with a stab of regret. I should have trusted my gut instincts. With Loretta, the whole thing had seemed so natural. Right. With Sabrina, there'd been more force, and a nagging voice had chattered at me right up until the final seconds. Why hadn't I listened? How do I help Sabrina? I asked, stuffing down the self-lecture for another time. What do I need to do to move her out of limbo? It's simple enough, I suppose, Carla began, considering the spirit trapped in the summoning circle. You've helped spirits cross over before. This will be no different. It just can't be forced. Sabrina's spirit was held back for a reason. There was unfinished business, something tethering her soul to this place. I don't know why, Sabrina pleaded. "Please, you have to believe me." "She was murdered," I offered. "In the past, I've found that once the case is solved, the spirit is released." "Do you know who killed you?" Carla asked Sabrina. The woman shook her head, fresh tears streaming down her semi-translucent cheeks like shining beads of mercury. "I don't want to think about it." "You have to, Sabrina," I said gently, approaching the circle. "Please, anything you can remember could be helpful. Unless you think there's something else that was holding you back. Your daughter?" "I miss her so much," Sabrina whispered. Tears pricked at my own eyes. "I'm sure you do. She'll be okay. She's strong and she has Jeffrey. For all his faults, he's a good father." A memory sparked. My conversation with Barry. "Sabrina, is it possible?" The circle flickered, and another hum, this one lower than the last, resounded in the room. Carla swore again. "The spell is dying. Sabrina, is it possible Jeffrey is the one who attacked you?" The ghost's eyes went wide, but her form flickered, and her words came out garbled. All I could make out was, "Never." Then she was gone. The light forming the circle sputtered and faded. Carla sighed. "Like I told you, I'm a lower class of summoner. I don't have the magical reserve to hold the summoning spell for long," she said, bending to retrieve the objects from the floor. She grabbed the necklace first and quickly slipped it back over her head. The pendant slipped under her shirt, and she collected the other items, placing them back in the satchel. I exhaled slowly. "When can you call her back here again?" "It will take a few days before my magic builds up again. I don't practice often, and when I do, it takes a toll." She slipped the last crystal into the bag, cinched it closed, and crossed to the corner of the carpet that concealed the loose floorboard. "Come back Sunday night. That should give you time to find out more about her murder. If you're right, and that's what she needs before she crosses over completely, we can give her the details and send her through and close this portal for good." "And if I can't?" Carla's eyes flashed. "Then you'd better study up on how to use whatever power you have to send a demon back over, because it will likely kill me before I get the chance to try." Chapter 9. I'd like to think what I did next is the same as any normal human would do upon finding out they'd trapped an innocent soul in limbo land and was on the verge of ushering a demon into the world. I went home, had a good old-fashioned freak-out, and then called my boyfriend. "I'm kind of wishing it was April 1st so I could chalk this up as a really twisted April Fool's prank," Lucas said when I finished breathlessly recounting the horrible evening to him. I snorted through my lingering tears. "Me too." "Phew," he exhaled. "I'm not sure where to start unpacking everything, to be honest." "That makes two of us." I sniffed and wiped at my eyes. I was lying on my bed, staring up at the ceiling, the scene playing out all over again in the shadows. And what if it's not enough? Let's say we can get to the bottom of this thing in time, and then we call her back, tell her what we found out, and then nothing happens. Then what? I know ghosts who took decades to move on. Any chance the demon coming through would be the Warner Brothers variety, with cute little horns and a tiny red pitchfork? Considering it has to eat a soul to get through to this world, I'm gonna venture a guess and say no. Right. A can of soda or beer cracked open in the background, and Lucas took a drink. Alcohol. Yes, excellent idea. I didn't even know demons were real, I scoffed. Ghosts? Sure. Witches and werewolves and vampires? Yeah, apparently that's all real too. And now this. Wait, what? Lucas said, clearly spitting some variety of liquid out along with the question. I jerked upright and slapped a hand over my mouth. No. No. Cringing, I lowered my hand. Any chance you can pretend I didn't say that part? Not a chance. Start talking. Yes, is there any way I'm not going to screw up today? Flapjack lifted his head from the pillow beside mine. Well, considering the circumstances, I wasn't going to say anything, but you forgot my can of tuna. I rolled my eyes and pushed myself out of the bed. Yeah. Scar? Lucas said. Witches? Vampires? Werewolves? I supposed it was inevitable that this day would come. It just would have been nice if it could have waited until another time. You know, like when there wasn't the overhanging threat of a bloodthirsty demon invasion. I was going to tell you, I started. Uh-huh. I slipped from the bedroom and crossed through the small living area to pull a beer from the fridge. Something dark and moody, I decided, running my fingertip along the bottles. I've only known for a little while, I continued, grabbing a bottle. I cracked it open using the opener magnet I kept on the fridge and went to the couch. I folded my legs underneath me and tried to decide how to compact everything I'd learned into a bite-sized lesson. There are a couple of witches here in town. One that I've become good friends with. Holly. I've probably mentioned her a time or two. Holly is a witch, Lucas said. I could picture him pacing his apartment, one hand raking through his hair. Yeah, like bibbidi-bobbidi-boo. Lucas swore. And she had a vampire roommate, and her boyfriend is a dog shifter. Dog shifter? You know, this will go a lot faster if you stop repeating everything I say, I mumbled. I'm just trying to figure out how this is the first time I'm hearing about any of this. I mean, Scarlett, this is crazy. Please tell me you're kidding. I set the bottle of beer aside on the small end table beside me. I really wish I was. It wasn't the first time I'd wished I could give my powers away, or banish the whole thing to the back of my mind the way Carla clearly had. What would it be like to have a normal life? No ghosts, no magic, certainly no demons. And if that wasn't bad enough that I had to war with the constant spookiness, now I'd dragged Lucas, a completely innocent bystander, into it. When we'd met, he was ghost curious. And so far, over the course of our relationship, he'd been as understanding and even eager to learn more about my world. But this was one too many stops down the line on the Crazy Train Express. Lucas, please, can we just forget I even brought it up? Oh, sure, no problem, Scar. Let me just force wipe it from my mind. He paused for effect. Whoop! There, all done. Now how about them Yankees? I frowned. All right, point made. What did they say about all this? Surely a witch would have some idea of what to do about a rogue demon. I haven't talked to Holly yet. You were my first call. He scoffed. Considering my limited powers and my mere mortal status, maybe I shouldn't have been. Lucas, I'm sorry, well, I don't know what I am right now. Processing, I guess. I picked at the frayed edge of the Afghan hanging over the back of the couch. Are you still coming into town Friday? Silence. My heart sank. I'd known one day all the insanity of my life would drive him away. After finding out about my soul magic, I'd just been waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sure, he said he'd stick around and that I couldn't scare him off, but everyone had their limit to what they were willing to put up with. Seeing ghosts and constantly having a third, fourth, and fifth wheel to our every waking moment was enough to make anyone run for their life. Lucas deserved better. If I weren't so selfish, I'd have cut him loose myself. No, selfish wasn't the right word. Terrified. Not of being alone. Hell, I'd spent most of my life alone. No, I was scared of just how much it would hurt to say goodbye to him. I understand if you don't want to. Scar, don't. His voice was firm, but not harsh. You can't keep setting me up like that. I told you I'm not going anywhere, and that hasn't changed. I was actually checking my schedule. I have a meeting tomorrow morning, but nothing formally planned for the afternoon. I'll head out after lunch and be there by dinner, okay? A lump formed in my throat, and I nodded, unable to speak. That is, if you'll have me an extra day, he added, a lightness returning to his tone. Of course, I replied. I'll see you then. Come to the shop first. I need to catch up on work since I played hooky today. You got it. I'll see you then. Try and get some sleep. I will. I love you, Scarlett. My chest squeezed. I love you too. As it turned out, sleep wasn't in the cards. After trying herbal tea, a white noise soundtrack on my phone, and a spritz of lavender-scented perfume across my pillowcases, I gave up the fight, dressed in leggings and a faded old t-shirt, and went downstairs to my studio. The whiteboard showed a handful of orders that were waiting to be completed. We were still in the lull before wedding season, and it was fairly easy to keep on top of things. But I needed to work, to do something, before I had another breakdown. I marched to the walk-in cooler and started pulling 5-gallon buckets of flowers, carnations, lilies, daisies, roses, and bundles of hydrangea. Flapjack stood on my work table when I lugged out the final bucket. Little late, isn't it? I tucked a strand of hair out of my face. Couldn't sleep. Figured I might as well get some work done. He sat down slowly and wrapped his full tail around his front paws. You gotta give yourself a break, Scar. You didn't know. Nodding, I turned to get a vase for the first arrangement. I know. So you're not down here beating yourself up? I frowned. Flapjack's constant companionship had its drawbacks, chief among them being that he knew me all too well and could pin me down with barely any effort. Though the constant seafood demands and sarcastic commentary could wear thin, too. My gaze drifted past him, stopping on the giant, overgrown houseplant in the corner. It had started off as a tiny mystery plant I rescued from the market's clearance rack. Though, looking at it now, you'd think I'd fed it a handful of magic beans. Which, I guess in a way, I had. Only I was the source of the magic. I still wasn't sure how it all worked. Holly had given me a book of spells when I'd been practicing. The plant picked up the magic and went berserk. The darn thing wouldn't stop growing, and I'd had to move it out of my kitchen before its vines reached the floor. During my time in New Orleans, I'd met a young woman who'd revealed that I was more than a ghost whisperer, and was the one who introduced me to the term soul shepherd. According to her, my magic held power over the force of life. I could channel the energy of a soul. It was a rare gift, and not one I'd ever wished for with a lucky penny. But here it was anyway. And now I'd seen firsthand just what it could do. Lucas is coming into town tomorrow, I told Flapjack, blinking back into focus. I took the vase to the sink and turned on the tap, waiting for the water to warm a little. He'll be here through Monday, so you and Hayward need to be on your best behavior. I don't want to spend the entire weekend breaking up your bickering matches. Flapjack cocked his head. I don't know why you're telling me this. Seems old Stuffed Shirt might be the one you want to talk to. He's the one who starts it. I scoffed, unable to hold a smile as I shook my head. I filled the vase halfway and took it back to the table. Where are they, anyway? I asked, reaching for a handful of boxwood. I guess we should fill them in on the situation. Lucas will be here and he's going to help, but it's an all-hands-on-deck situation, I'd say. They're at McNally's, Flapjack said. Karaoke night. I stilled, one sprig of boxwood poised over the vase. Hayward is singing karaoke? Flapjack snorted. Would I be sitting here talking to you if he was? Good point. Once a month, the pub stayed open till 2 a.m. for a town-wide karaoke contest. I'd gone once or twice, and let's just say that no one in Beechwood Harbor was going to be featured on The Voice anytime soon. Gwen's in a singing group now, Flapjack continued. The Spice Ghouls. You're kidding, I laughed. Which one is Gwen? Sporty? Baby? She's really more of a ginger, isn't she? They're all scary, if you ask me. Believe me, you're not missing anything. It's ear-bleedy. Ear-bleedy? I raised an eyebrow. Is that a technical term, conductor? Do you like cringeworthy better? Or maybe I should say their performance has a certain flee and run in front of a train quality to it? I laughed. It can't be that bad. Flapjack's whiskers twitched. All I'm saying is that you need to prepare yourself. Because if the Spice Ghouls win this first round of competition, you're going to get an invite to sit front row for the finals. He gave an irritated flick of his tail and muttered, At least you have ear canals. You can buy earplugs. I'll keep that in mind, I said, still grinning. I placed a few more sprigs of boxwood, and then went to work cutting down a few long-stem roses to the appropriate length for the vase, working from the tallest point down to create a full, round bouquet. We have to tell them eventually, I said, after weaving a few more roses into the arrangement. About tonight. I know, Flapjack replied, suddenly serious. Are you sure there wasn't anything useful in the police station? Do you think you could go back again and take a second look? I'm not sure how much I'll be able to get out of Chief Lincoln without raising suspicion. From the outside, I have no connection to the case, or even to Sabrina. besides being the one who did her funeral flowers. I'll try. Maybe Sturgeon will go with me. He can move papers around, see if there's something buried in one of the stacks. Sturgeon was one of Gwen's ghost friends, a former army sergeant who'd somehow developed the ability to move physical objects in his spirit form. His powers had come in handy a time or two, and snooping around the police station would be the perfect time to ask the grizzled veteran for a favor. I'll take Lucas and go back to Sabrina's neighborhood. We might be able to get a broader picture of her life if we chat with a few of the other neighbors. If they're as tight-knit as Barry made it sound, someone might have a lead. Flapjack nodded, but there was a worried droop in his whiskers. We'll figure it out, I said, forcing a glimmer of brightness into my tone as I snipped a few inches off a rose stem and sliced off a stray thorn. We've had tougher cases before. Flapjack lifted his brows. Maybe so, but the last time we didn't have a demon chasing at our heels. I frowned at him and plunked the rose into the vase. Gee, and here I'd almost forgotten. Chapter 10. Of course we had to do an encore. I mean, the crowd demanded it, Gwen said, grinning from ear to ear as she recounted the glories of her karaoke set the night before. So we all got back on stage and we did Spice Up Your Life. It was a big crowd pleaser. Even some of the lucky lady gals were singing along. I shot Hayward a glance. Really? He nodded, beaming with pride at Gwen. The song was new to me, but quite an earworm. I've been bopping along to it all morning. Quite bouncy. Flapjack snickered. You should see when he tries to shake his hips. He looks like a geriatric wildebeest. I'm not sure I can even picture that, I replied, blinking to clear the images my mind attempted to piece together from the feline's colorful analogy. Hayward, too busy fawning over Gwen, didn't notice the cat's insult. Which was for the best. We were on a tight timeline as it was, and their bickering wasn't going to help anything. Lizzie had asked for the day off, so I was able to speak freely with the ghosts as I prepared the shop to open for the day. I'd done an hour and a half the night before, and finally fell asleep a little after 2:30 in the morning. I'd cursed my alarm when it had rung 4 hours later, but had managed to peel myself from under the covers when the smell of fresh brewed coffee floated down the hall. Lucas had insisted on buying me a fancy coffee maker when I'd visited him in the city. He claimed it was for his own benefit during his weekend stays at my apartment, which would become more frequent now that he was living 3 hours away. The machine could do all kinds of tricks, but for the most part, I had it set to brew my vanilla coffee every morning, and so far it seemed to do the trick in getting me out of bed in 3 rounds or less with the snooze button. All right, enough chit-chat, Flapjack declared. Scar has something she needs to tell you guys. Hayward and Gwen both looked to me, their smiles fading. What's wrong, Scarlet? Gwen asked. If that Lucas scoundrel broke your heart, I'll run him through with a... Hayward paused, his thick mustache twitching in agitation as he appeared to search for the right weapon. A scabbard? Gwen offered helpfully. Flapjack cackled. A wet noodle is more like it. Hayward glared at Flapjack, his cheeks puffing out under his spectacles. It would be some kind of sword, he promised, still scowling at the cat. Turning to Gwen, he softened. A scabbard is the holder of the sword, Lady Gwen. Well, either way, I'm sure you'd be very intimidating, Gwen said in all seriousness. Flapjack opened his mouth, but I cut him off, drawing my hand quickly along my neck. Oh, fine, he grumbled. This isn't about Lucas, I told Hayward, and he isn't a scoundrel. Flapjack rallied, his tail swishing. He resents him because Gwen thinks he's hot. I slapped a hand over my face, dragging it down slowly. What possessed me to think I could handle all 3 of them before 10 a.m.? Flapjack, focus. Demons, remember? I snapped. Gwen and Hayward went still. Lady Scarlet, did I hear you correctly? Yes. I drew in a deep breath and laid out the events of the night before, shrinking the debacle into as quick of a story as I could manage without leaving anything important out. Hayward and Gwen's horror intensified as they listened, hanging on every word until I finished. Hayward's mustache twitched again, as his eyes flicked back and forth like an out-of-control typewriter. Poor Sabrina, Gwen wailed. She's really stuck with no one to talk to? "You'd die all over again," Flapjack muttered under his breath. I glowered at him, and he buttoned up again. "We're going to set this right, but I'm going to need your help." "You have us assembled," Hayward boomed. "What shall the first task be?" Why do I feel like we need theme songs and some kind of garment made entirely from spandex? Flapjack wondered. Gwen shot her hand into the air, wiggling impatiently. "Ooh, can I pick out the costumes?" "Yup, it's official," Flapjack quipped. "We're doomed." I shot him a pointed look before turning a more patient expression toward Gwen. "Let's put a pin in the costume idea for now," I said. "What I really need is some help getting leads. Do you think you and Hayward could go to Pine Shoals and see if there are any local ghosts? And if so, find out if any of them know anything about Sabrina and what might have happened to her?" Hayward raised his gloved hand in a salute. "Of course, Lady Scarlet." Gwen nodded eagerly. "Consider it done." "Great, thanks you guys." I paused and glanced up at the clock. "I've got to hold down things here at the store, and then Lucas is coming in sometime this afternoon. Think we can all have dinner together?" Flapjack tilted his head. "Will there be anything for us? Say, a can of long-awaited tuna?" I sighed. Yes. Though to be clear, I think long-awaited is a bit of a stretch. It's been less than 24 hours. Time moves differently for ghosts, Scar. Uh-huh. I grinned, shaking my head. I miss the days when I could send him on his way with a prodding of my toes. "I'll sweeten the pot and give you 2 if you come home with info from the police station." That got him going. He perked, jumped down from the work table, and scurried through the nearest wall with almost a trot in his fluffy-footed steps. "We'll be on our way as well," Hayward announced, before valiantly offering Gwen his crooked arm. Gwen slid her hand through the loop, and they exchanged a sweet smile. "You can count on us, Scarlet." I thanked them and sent them off. As they vanished through the wall, Gwen's voice echoed back, "This is so exciting." I sighed, wishing I had an ounce of her enthusiasm. All I was left with was a twisted knot of guilt and dread, though it did help knowing I had the 3 ghosts helping me. There was half an hour until opening, and everything was in order for the day. Now all I could do was wait, and do my best not to freak out. By 3:30, I was walking my 4th customer of the day to the door and contemplating closing down for the day. In another few weeks, the shop would be packed full of tourists and out-of-towners, and I'd be longing for the quiet afternoons where sneaking out early was even an option. I waved to Mr. Welsh as he scurried away, one hand wrapped around a ticket out of the doghouse with Mrs. Welsh bouquet straight from the cooler. So far, the ghosts hadn't circled back to provide an update. Technically, we'd made plans to wait until dinner, but with the ghosts, things rarely went according to plan, and I'd expected to hear from at least one of them by now. I tried not to read too much into their absence and went back to the register. With the punch of a few keys, the drawer popped open and I started counting the till. The bell on the door rang and I glanced up, my usual greeting catching on the tip of my tongue as Lucas strode through the door. Grinning, I popped my hip and braced my fist against it. "Good afternoon, sir. How's the day treating you?" Lucas returned my smile as he sauntered closer. He slipped his hands into the pockets of his jeans and shrugged. "Can't complain. Had a bit of a drive, but the view was worth it," he replied, giving me a meaningful look. Little butterflies swirled through my stomach. "Tell me, are you looking for something specific today?" His smile widened. "I've got a thing for tall redheads." I laughed, slipping out of my impromptu character. "Guess you're in luck." "I'd say." He leaned across the counter and kissed me firmly. "I missed you," he said, one hand still on the side of my face. Any lingering apprehension about our conversation the night before faded to the background, and I kissed him. "I missed you too." "How's business? It seems a little quiet around town." I nodded and went back to counting the till. "After this weekend, things will pick up. Did you notice all the hanging baskets?" "I did. Nice work." I smiled. "Thanks." He glanced around the shop. "Are we alone?" "For now," I replied. "We're having dinner with the posse." "Aha." I filled him in on the plan as I went through the closing procedures. I scanned both sides of the street before flipping the open sign around to closed, and pulled the chain on the neon sign in the window. Before I locked up, Lucas went back to his SUV to grab the large duffel bag he usually traveled with. Sure, he could afford a proper suitcase, but he was ex-military, and some habits died hard. He was insistent that the duffel could outperform any luggage on the market. We agreed to disagree on that subject. I locked the shop up for the night, turned off the lights, and led the way upstairs to my apartment. Lucas stashed his bag in the bedroom, and then came back out to the living room, where I was firing up a second pot of gourmet coffee. "You read my mind," he said, gesturing at the chrome machine. "How are you liking it? Is your mind blown? Life forever changed?" he teased, a playful spark in his green eyes. I laughed. "I don't know if I'd go that far, but yes, it does make things easier in the morning. Thank you." He smiled. I'd never had someone dote on me with gifts and flowers before, always having preferred to buy things for myself. But with Lucas, it was clearly the best way he knew how to show me how much he cared, so I let him spoil me. Coming from a wealthy family, I'd grown up without needing or wanting anything. Even as an adult, I'd lived an insulated life. I'd insisted on working my way from place to place while I'd traveled abroad, but I always knew there was a safety net in case things unraveled. Even Lily Pond was a dream financed in large part thanks to my family. My grandmother left me a sum of money when she passed on, and I'd used it all to lease the rental space and attached apartment. I'd run out of inheritance money some time ago, but without it, the flower shop would have stayed a dream in my head rather than the brick-and-mortar walls around me. When it came to Lucas, I wanted everything to be on even footing. We equally split bills and treated each other. But when it boiled down to it, he had more money than I did, at least without my parents' backing. He'd spent years running his own security firm and had been contracted by a television network to oversee the security needs of a popular home renovation reality show, Mints on the Pillows. Things soured, and he'd severed ties with the network after his time in New Orleans, and dissolved his company after getting offered a job with the firm in Seattle. It wasn't TV money, but he was still making a good salary, and they'd even paid all his relocation expenses and offered a large signing bonus. I wasn't sure of the exact dollar amounts, but it was enough that he'd bought a new SUV, a few new suits for client meetings, and we enjoyed a very fancy dinner at one of Seattle's finest restaurants not too long after he signed his contract. I have to say, driving into town today, I was scanning every face, waiting for someone to sprout fangs or wings. He shook his head. I still haven't quite wrapped my head around everything. I keep thinking about the implications it has for my line of work. I mean, how many strange occurrences and unexplainable things could be traced back to magic? They do a pretty good job of policing their own, I told him, moving to the cupboard to pull down 2 mugs. They have their own CIA and police and government. It's all very organized. Somehow, I didn't think that helped relieve Lucas's questions. Judging by the look on his face, it only added to them. I laughed softly and handed him the first cup of coffee. You look like you need this one more than I do. He took it, still dumbfounded. Thanks. I poured the second cup and replaced the carafe in the machine. Let's sit. The ghosts will be here any minute. I wish I could hear them for myself, Lucas said as we settled onto the couch. He draped his free arm over my shoulder, and I snuggled into his side. For a tiny moment, everything was right with the world. There was no threat of demon invasion, lost ghosts, or magic. Naturally, the moment lasted all of 3 seconds. Before I could get too comfortable, the trio arrived, seemingly in a synchronized entrance, floating through the door in a single-file line. Oh, goody, boyfriend's here, Flapjack quipped, stalking into the room. Or should I call him your scoundrel? I narrowed my eyes. Lucas tensed, sitting a little straighter. They're here? Yes, I replied, leaning forward to place my coffee mug on the table. All right, let's get this thing started. You want to start with the good news or the bad news? Flapjack asked. I looked at Lucas and sighed. Bad news. Chapter 11. The bad news is that the leads are going cold, And Chief Lincoln's the only one really trying to chase this thing down," Flapjack said. I frowned. That doesn't make any sense. It's not even the BHPD's case. The reason we took so long is because we all went to the Pine Shoals station to compare notes. They've moved on to chasing down a vandal who sprayed half the town with these really tacky spray paint murals in the middle of the night, Flapjack continued. And that's more important than a woman strangled to death in her own home? I asked, my eyebrows peaked. That's why Chief Lincoln is so cranky, Flapjack said. He came into the Pine Shoals station while we were there and tore their lead deputy a new one. Told him if he was too lazy to track down a killer, he didn't deserve his badge. I blinked. Chief Lincoln said that? Flapjack smiled. It was awesome. It was hard to picture Chief Lincoln coming unglued. He was young for a police chief, but he was mature beyond his years and didn't have a temper as far as I knew. How did it end? I asked. He stormed out and said he'd do the canvassing himself, Flapjack said. So, we followed along. It explained why the trio hadn't circled back to the flower shop. They followed Chief Lincoln while he interviewed neighbors, I quickly explained to Lucas. And that's bad news? He asked. Frowning, I shifted my gaze back to Flapjack. Good point. You said this is the bad news. The bad news is we followed him around while he talked to a dozen people and came up with nothing, Flapjack clarified. Oh, I deflated. He didn't find anything. Got it. Lucas sipped his beer. So the neighbor you talked to thinks it was the ex-husband? What about him? What's he say about it? Russ Hutchins, Flapjack said. Guess Sabrina kept his last name. Anyway, he has an alibi, and his daughter, Miranda, backs it up. She was staying with him for the weekend and kept the movie ticket stub from their night out. They were in the theater at the time of the attack. I relayed the info to Lucas. The line between his brows deepened. Could he have hired it out? He asked. It's possible, I answered. But I'm not sure how they'd find out if they don't have enough to get a warrant, or bring him in for a formal interview at the station. And if the Pine Shoals PD is distracted by this spray paint vandal, they might not be digging too deeply. I exhaled and leaned back in my chair. Gwen, Hayward, what about you? Did you get anything from the local ghosts? Oddly, the place is a ghost town. We couldn't find any, Gwen said. No ghosts? I repeated. In the whole town? I mentally added it to a list of potential vacation spots. Do they have any bed and breakfasts? Lucas whispered out of the corner of his mouth, apparently on the same wavelength I was. All three ghosts frowned at him. I laughed. You're not scoring any points here, babe. He shrugged and went back to drinking. So, no ghosts, no leads, and the ex-husband is off the hook. I tapped my nails against the table, my mind whirling. Remind me what the good news was and all that? The good news is that Sturgeon did a little digging for us and found something in ex-hubby's trash, Flapjack said. Where is Sturgeon? I asked, glancing around, halfway expecting him to be lurking in a corner somewhere. He was deadly silent, even for a ghost. He had to go. Poker night, Flapjack explained. But he left it out on the porch. He couldn't bring it in through the wall. I straightened. He brought it here? What else were we supposed to do with it? Flapjack asked. Leave it there? I sighed and pushed up from the table. Yes! The police can't use it as evidence if it's been tampered with. Scar, what are we talking about? Lucas asked, twisting in his chair as I went to the door. I opened it, found a small phone on the welcome mat, and frowned. This. Lucas was at my side in 10 seconds, staring down at the phone. Looks like a burner phone. Let me get some gloves, I said, hurrying to the kitchen. I pulled a pair of hot pink rubber gloves out from under the sink. They went to the elbow and were lined with a soft floral print. I handed them to Lucas, and he laughed. Not really my style, but all right. I rolled my eyes. You'll know what to do to download the information. He took a glove and stuffed his right hand into it, cringing at the tight fit. Flapjack cackled as Lucas donned the hot pink gloves. Maybe we could find him an apron and a little hat, too. Hayward's mustache twitched as he struggled to contain a laugh. I shot them both a warning look. Lucas plucked the phone from the mat with his gloved hand and flipped it open. Miraculously, there was some juice left in the battery, and the tiny screen lit up. "No contacts," he said, tapping the silver buttons. "No nothing, really. A few outbound calls, all to the same number. No inbound calls. You might have had the number jammed so it would come up as unlisted. Scarlett, can you get me a pad of paper?" I went back to the kitchen, tossed the spare glove into the sink, and then dug a small pad and a pen from the catch-all drawer under the microwave. Lucas jotted down the phone number, along with the dates and times of the calls. When he laid the pen down, he did one more scan through the phone and then snapped it closed. "That's everything." "Is Sturgeon coming back to collect it?" I asked Flapjack. "After poker?" "Poker?" Lucas repeated. "I didn't know ghosts could play poker. Maybe this whole death thing won't be so bad after all." I rolled my eyes. "Why would he come back for the phone?" Flapjack asked. "It needs to go back in the trash. And I'm certainly not driving all the way to Pine Shoals to go reverse dumpster diving in the middle of the night." Lucas looked to me and wiggled the phone. "Put it back on the mat," I directed. Flapjack heaved a long-suffering sigh. "I'll go tell Sturgeon to take it back. He's not going to be happy about it, though." "All right. So to make sure I'm following," Lucas said, coming back to the table after replacing the phone and removing the glove. "The ex-husband has an alibi, the daughter. But he's also got a mysterious burner phone in his trash?" "Yes," Flapjack and I said at the same time. "It had to have been charged up recently," Lucas said. "There was over half the battery left. But the last call was made 2 weeks ago. If he used it to contact some hitman, why would he keep it around all this time?" "I don't know. Could he have scrubbed other data off it?" "It's possible. I know a guy who could try to hack it, but he's all the way in Chicago. It would take a couple of days to get the phone to him, even if we overnighted it." "Right." I sighed and looked down at the pad where Lucas had written the number. "Should we call it? See if anyone answers?" "I have a better way," Lucas said. Without further explanation, he ducked into the bedroom and came back with his laptop. "I have a program that can do a reverse lookup." "Oh, right, I forgot. I'm dating a part-time super spy." Lucas chuckled and opened the computer. "I must have left my cape in my other duffel bag." "It's for the best," I teased. "It would only slow us down." Flapjack groaned. "You two are insufferable." Hayward cleared his throat. "Perhaps I'm being daft," he began. Flapjack opened his mouth, but I silenced him with a look before he could pounce on Hayward. "But I'm not sure I understand why this phone is so strange. Isn't it possible he simply got a new one and threw the old one away?" "It's a burner phone," I explained, "which means it's not attached to some kind of phone carrier and is basically untraceable. That on its own wouldn't necessarily mean anything, but the fact that it's clearly in working order but was thrown in the trash seems a little strange, as though the phone served its purpose and was now worthless." "Why would the ex-husband want to kill Sabrina?" Gwen asked. When Flapjack and I spoke with Sabrina's neighbor, he told us the exes were locked in a pretty nasty legal battle. He wanted to move out of state for an important job offer, and Sabrina wasn't allowing him to change their custody agreement. Now, with Sabrina dead, he gets full custody and can do whatever he wants. "Looks like he's been saving a bundle, too," Lucas added, his fingers flying over his keyboard. "I just pulled up their divorce settlement. Sabrina was getting $8,000 a month from Russ." $8,000? Lucas nodded. "They separated 3 years ago, but the divorce was only finalized 18 months ago. It took over a year to hammer out the deal. The $8,000 is a combination of alimony and child support. But even once their daughter turns 18, Russ will still fork out over $4,000 a month to his ex for another 7 years." I shook my head, trying to add up the total sum. Wow, she must have had a killer lawyer. "If that isn't the perfect case for a prenup, I don't know what is," Lucas muttered under his breath. My brows crinkled together as I stared at him. "You'd get a prenup?" He looked up, a startled look on his face. "Sure, why not?" I scoffed. "That's kind of depressing, isn't it? You're planning for the marriage to fail before it even starts?" Flapjack flicked his tail, a slow grin spreading on his face as he leaned in. "Oh, this just got good." I shot him a sideways scowl. Uh, I didn't mean anything by it, Scar. But yeah, I think if you're rich, it's a good idea. Well, let's say it was us. You have your TV money, I have my inheritance, most of which is tied up in the business. Would we? I stopped myself, realizing two things. One, we had an audience. Two, we'd never formally talked about marriage, let alone any of the steps that might get us there. Never mind, I said quickly before he could answer. What's going on with the phone numbers? Lucas stared at me for another long moment before dropping his gaze back to the screen. No hits yet on the numbers. It's still processing. All right. Well, in the meantime, let's get some food ordered. I jumped up from the table, my cheeks still warm, and scurried into the kitchen. I pulled open the drawer under the microwave and flipped through the takeout menus from the local eateries. You want something from McNally's? There's probably a 30-minute wait. Pizza would be faster. Scarlett, Lucas said. When he didn't answer, I looked over at him. He was watching me with a conflicted look on his face. I raised my brows expectantly, and he jerked upright. Can you, watch this? I need to use the restroom. My heart sank. Sure. He got up and took long strides across the living room. And pizza sounds good. Our usual. Seconds later, the bathroom door closed. I raked my fingers through my hair, wishing I'd kept my mouth shut. Flapjack sighed. Sheesh. Way to spook the herd, Scar. She didn't spook him, Gwen insisted, scowling at the cat. Lucas isn't going to scare off just because you brought up marriage. You sure about that? I mumbled, casting a glance toward the short hallway he'd just ducked into. Gwen chewed the corner of her lip. I drew in a deep breath. It's fine. I'm going to order some food. We'll see if we get a hit on the phone numbers. Was there anything else? Flapjack shook his head. All right. Well, thanks, guys. And thanks, Sturgeon, too. I grabbed my own phone off the kitchen counter and held up the menu for the pizza place down the street. I think we're going to call it a night on the PI stuff for the night. That's our cue, Flapjack said grumpily. We're getting the boot. Hayward rose and automatically offered his arm to Gwen. She slipped her hand through it and then gave me a quick smile. Have a nice night, Scarlett. Everything's going to be fine. I attempted a smile in return, but it felt forced. Thanks, Gwen. You too. They turned away, heading for the door. Hayward said something to Gwen as they slipped through, and one of the hushed words sounded a lot like, scoundrel. I sighed and flopped onto the couch. Lucas reappeared moments later and went to the table to lean over his laptop. Anything? I asked. Does the name Scott Putnam mean anything to you? I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. I don't think so. Is that who Russ was calling? Lucas nodded, his fingers flying back into action. I waited impatiently as he worked. After a few minutes, his computer spat out a ping sound, and Lucas swore. Well, I don't know much, but he's got a record. Aggravated assault. Looks like he only got out of prison 6 months ago. Lucas straightened and gave me an earnest look. And what better place to get a world-class education in being a hitman than inside the slammer? A strange mixture of hope and dread churned through me. Sounds like we got our guy. What next? I think we need to pay a visit to Mr. Hutchins and see why he was having secret conversations with a violent felon. Sure. What could go wrong? Chapter 12. Gwen winged into the kitchen the next morning as I put on a pot of coffee. She'd perched herself on the counter beside the fridge, and I nearly dropped the glass carafe of cream when I closed the door and found her there. I swore loudly, and then winced. Lucas was still sleeping soundly in the other room. Gwen! I hissed, adjusting my volume. How many times do I have to tell you guys not to sneak up on me? She smiled. Sorry. Grumbling under my breath, I poured the cream into my first cup of coffee and then replaced the small container in the fridge. Why are you here so early? Isn't this prime time at the Lucky Lady? The Lucky Lady salon was Gwen's favorite haunt. She floated around, slurping up all the gossip and small-town drama like it was sweet nectar. Personally, I couldn't understand the appeal. Whenever I'd gone in for a trim, it was a bunch of ladies complaining about their husband's fashion sense or inability to see items right in front of their faces when looking for food. Occasionally, there were younger women, though they mostly bemoaned the lack of decent shopping options and eligible men in Beechwood Harbor. "It's book club today," Gwen said. "They're all at Hannah Wessel's place drinking mimosas and watching Magic Mike for the dozenth time." I blinked. Gwen laughed at my puzzled expression. "They just tell their husbands it's a book club so they won't tag along or ask too many questions. Normally they catch up on The Bachelor, but it's the off-season, so Channing Tatum has worked back into the regular rotation. Not that I'm complaining. The man is basically a walking sculpture." I sat down at the kitchen table and started on my coffee. If I was going to keep up with Gwen, I'd need every last drop. "You still haven't answered my question. What are you doing here?" Gwen swooped across the kitchen and effortlessly floated into the chair across from mine. "I wanted to come make sure you were okay." "Why wouldn't I be?" She shrugged. "Last night, things with Lucas seemed a little tense." I frowned. "You want to know if we talked about getting married?" Gwen innocently batted her long lashes. "Only if you want to talk about it." "Well, I don't," I told her. "Actually, I take that back. It's not that I don't want to talk about it, it's that there's nothing to talk about." "Does it bother you that he wants a prenup?" Gwen asked, undeterred. "It's kind of Hollywood, don't you think?" "If by Hollywood you mean high maintenance and unnecessary, then yes, it's very Hollywood." Gwen cocked her head, her eyes narrowed. "You're grumpy this morning. Why is that?" "Gwen, it's 8 o'clock. I haven't had my coffee, and you're in here peppering me with questions about marriage. It's just a little too much right now." She straightened and placed her folded hands on the table. "What are you doing now?" I asked, eyeing her cautiously. "I'm waiting until you finished your coffee." "Oh, for the love of begonias." I set my coffee down. "I don't care that Lucas wants a prenup. It's probably the smart decision, from a logical standpoint, that he protects himself legally. My parents will probably require me to have one anyway, so really it's saving me an argument with them, if and when it ever came down to it. But honestly, this whole conversation is ridiculous because Lucas and I are not engaged." "Do you want to marry him?" I sputtered at the simple question. I mean, maybe someday. If things were headed that way, we could—" "Scarlett," Gwen interrupted, tilting her head again. "Yes or no? First thing that comes to mind, do you want to marry Lucas?" I pressed my lips together. Gwen raised her eyebrows. "Fine. Yes, I think." Gwen squealed. I shushed her before remembering Lucas wouldn't be able to hear her, then was struck with how truly insane my life was and started laughing. "This is ridiculous," I told her. She bounced in her seat, rubbing her hands together. "Think of the wedding plans. You've probably got the flowers all picked out in your head, but there's the dress and the church and the cake. I like those cakes where they have the little plastic people on top. Why don't people do those anymore? Gwen, slow down." I almost reminded her to take a deep breath, but caught myself in time. "This is all just wild speculation. Lucas hasn't even hinted at marriage. I'm not sure he ever plans to marry." That dampened her celebration. She sank back into her chair, her smile fading. "Well, what would you do then?" I sipped my coffee. "What do you mean?" "If he doesn't want to get married and you do." I exhaled. "I'm not worried about that right now. We haven't been together that long, and he just started a new job, and I've got all this magic crap to figure out. It's okay if we wait." "Would you leave Beechwood Harbor?" Gwen asked, suddenly sober. The question was simple enough, but it somehow hit me upside the head from left field, and I hesitated. I don't know, Gwen. I honestly haven't thought about it." The bedroom door opened and I snapped my mouth shut. Footsteps sounded, and then the bathroom door closed. "That's Lucas," I whispered. I don't know why I thought she'd take the hint and clear out. Before I could make my meaning clearer, the door opened and Lucas shuffled into the living room. He wore a pair of flannel pajama bottoms, and nothing else. He ruffled his tousled hair and scrubbed his hand down his face before looking at me. Good morning, baby. Coffee smells good." Gwen's jaw nearly unhinged as she stared at him, the look in her eyes similar to the one Flapjack got near the fish section of the grocery store. I cleared my throat, and she snapped out of it. What, Scar? What were you saying?" Silently, I tossed my head toward the front door. She frowned, but levitated from the chair and soared through the room. "This conversation isn't over," she warned, before sliding out the front door. "How'd you sleep?" I asked Lucas, propping my feet up on the chair Gwen had vacated. "I'm not gonna lie. I think the bed at my new place has spoiled me for all other beds," Lucas teased, going to the coffee maker. I smiled. "We can't all have the full Marriott experience." He laughed. "What are the odds I can talk you into making your buttermilk pancakes?" I asked, shifting my attention back to Lucas. "You always get them fluffier than I do." Lucas grinned and poured a cup of coffee for himself. "That's because I'm patient and wait for the baking powder to activate before I start cooking them. You just throw a big glob in the pan and hope for the best." I scowled at his back, but kept my peace, mostly because I wanted pancakes. Lucas chuckled. "I can feel you glaring, by the way." "I'll make you a deal," I said. "You make the pancakes now, and I'll buy you lunch later." Lucas reached into the cupboard where I kept my mixing bowls and pulled the largest one down. I grinned and finished my coffee while he went to work on the batter. "Who are you talking with?" Lucas asked, glancing over his shoulder at me. "I heard you out here chatting." My cheeks warmed. Just how much of my side of the conversation had he picked up on? Mentally, I replayed as much as I could remember. Yikes. Gwen. She stopped by for a few minutes. She's gone now. Come to think of it." I paused and craned my neck to peek over the back of the couch. Empty. No one's here. Where were Flapjack and